Hello, hello, everybody. It is Thursday. You know what that means. It means it's time for some more bad writing. And today we're going to be talking about the J.J. Abrams mystery box concept, what it is, and why it's considered bad writing, at least by those who can appreciate good writing. I am your intrepid host, Matthew Kadish of the Salty Nerd podcast. And if you guys want to help support the show and support these live streams, please go check out saltynerdclub.com. That's our members only area. Over there, we do members only specific shows. So if you like our regular Salty Nerd Weekly show, you get even more of that stuff over there. We drop patron only, members only episodes every Monday. Right now, we're doing the Foundation review stuff. So basically, we're going through Apple TV's new Foundation series, and we're doing like a show-by-show recap, kind of like what we do with the show C, and what we've done with like the Marvel shows like Loki, Falcon Winter Soldier, WandaVision. So the patrons get exclusive access to that. They also get exclusive access to our Discord server and all that good stuff. So today I've got a very special panel of experts for this particular topic. And one of our guests is running a little bit late, so we may have to kind of pad the beginning of this until he arrives. But don't worry, it's going to be worth it. Anyway, what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be kind of focusing, instead of a particular movie or TV show or anything like that, we're going to be focusing on a concept. And this is a concept that has pretty much ruined Hollywood, in my humble opinion. But we're going to be talking about that. And for those of you in the chat, you kind of know that, you know, when we're talking with our expert panel, we're not always bringing in, the stuff that you guys post in chat. But if you do super chats, we'll be sure to kind of like, work those into the conversation and all that good stuff. So if you want to support us through super chats, that's a great way to do it. And we have our intrepid panel here. So, Sean, I will start with you since you're the only one who's actually on the screen at the moment. So this is Sean Collette, who is also known as the Crabapple Critic, but he's also a film professor at the College of Southern Nevada, and he's a very smart man who actually teaches people how to make movies. Sean, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about what you do?
Well, I'm a professor at the College of Southern Nevada, as you said, and I teach editing, where the movies are actually made, and sound and visual effects, and I teach the introductory class, Vid 1. So I cover just about everything. I think the only thing I don't really like doing in terms of filmmaking is actually operating a camera. It doesn't interest me at all. I trust DPs to do that, so, but yeah, and one of these days I might launch my channel. I'm always so busy, I don't have a chance to review movies. And even though I've got an extensive library here, I don't actually have the time to put in to make them, because I'm always just actually making independent and student films. So one of these days I'll do it.
Telling your students how much their movies suck, right?
Yes, I definitely. That's my overtime hours right there, is doing that.
All right, and looking very dapper today with his brand new beard, the one and only Chris Coles, aka Mr. Reagan. How you doing, sir? Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and let them know what makes you qualified to talk about J.J. Abrams?
Oh, I'm not qualified. My name is Chris Coles. I go by Mr. Reagan on the YouTubes. Well, I'll tell you what. So I moved to Hollywood in, I think, something like 2010 to try to write film scripts. So I'm a student of cinema. I suppose my primary influence is Twilight Zone, which tends to be true of like every writer in Hollywood, so that's not particularly unique. But I have one qualification, is that I'm a totally failed author. I've never produced anything. So that gives me unique insight, I believe, into, at least how not to write scripts, if nothing else.
Well, we're glad that you could join us, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And our special guest today is a first time on the Bad Writing live stream. It is none other than Literature Devil himself. Now, I've known Literature Devil for a number of years via Twitter. He is so handsome that he has to speak from an avatar. So you won't be able to see his face, but you'll be able to hear his silky smooth voice. He's also the author of the Dr. Alpha comic book that is going to be coming out shortly. Literature Devil, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and also, about your comic book?
Hello, everyone. Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And hello to you, chat. Hello and good evening, chat. Hello. I'm Literature Devil. I come from I have a YouTube channel called Literature Devil, oddly enough, and I kind of explore the philosophy, the craft of writing, things of that nature. I did a whole video, in fact, on J.J. Abrams' Mystery Box, and I had a new one that just came out about woke American comics versus manga. Why I go into the craft and the building block reasons why manga is winning over woke comics. It's not really some literary secret. It's basic storycraft, and it's just that woke comics have intentionally done away with what traditionally works and people would traditionally like in stories and stuff like that. Got to keep the tradition. Sometimes some traditions are good to keep. But I've also coming out with a comic book that I've been working on for the last 2 years. I guess COVID hit really hurt us in terms of when it came out. But the thing is, it's going to come out soon. The main story is already done. Dr. Alpha Miracle Child, the comic book I'm coming out with fairly soon. You can be found on Indiegogo still, and it's around, the main story is about 112 pages long, so it's pretty lengthy story. Plus, you get a 10-page story of another character that's going to be coming out with her own comic book. Should Dr. Alpha remain successful? Lady Midnight, extra 10-page story, and then the campaign was successful enough that we wrote an additional story, unlocked an additional side story, an 8-page side story going over called the Dr. Alpha, the New Kid. Plus, there's going to be some extra goodies and stuff in there. So it's going to be a pretty hefty book, and it comes in 2 different sizes, or 2 different versions: the regular softcover version and the hardcover. And then each one comes with the digital version. So the digital version will be sent out to everyone's email. So it's going to be pretty fun. It's a Dr. Alpha Miracle Child about a supervillain who teams up, who essentially gets recruited by his arch enemy to help stop another enemy of his called Movion the Martian Mastermind, who is trying to invade Earth. And it gets the plot is probably cliche, where the alien invades Earth, but the story of it all is a lot more interesting.
It sounds really good, and if you guys want to check it out, the link is in the description of this video.
Can I just say I love the name Dr. Alpha? Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, much appreciate it. I kind of
awesome
took inspiration from the pulp fiction. Mm-hmm. I actually use a pulp fiction formula to write the story. But how pulp has this idea of just going over the top on everything. It's like Dr. Alpha, that'll work.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of having Literature Devil on this particular episode is that he did do a video that was in direct response to J.J. Abrams' TED Talk, talking about how to fix the mystery box concept. It's a very good video. In fact, I have both videos linked in the description, so if you guys want to check those out, feel free to. But just to open this up, I wanted to ask you guys, did you have time to watch or rewatch J.J. Abrams' actual TED Talk where he introduced this concept? I think was it back in like 2008 or something like
2006, I think.
2006.
Or 2006 or 2007, somewhere. It was something like that. I know it was, 13 years ago, so maybe, 2008. Yeah.
I didn't rewatch it, but I can say I remember it very clearly because of how annoyed I was at the time.
Yeah.
I remember the gist of it.
Well, what's funny is like when it came out, people were like, because I was living in Hollywood at the time, everyone that I talked to was like, "Did you see J.J. Abrams' TED Talk? Man, that was amazing. That was spectacular. It blew my mind. I watched it 20 billion times." And I can remember when I first watched it, like at the time, I was like a big fan of Lost, and I was a big fan of J.J. Abrams and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, man, like that TED Talk's like, like super cool. But just like his movies, if you watch that TED Talk, you get caught up in his like excitement and kind of charm and presenting his ideas. And a lot of the most successful directors in Hollywood are really good at like, getting people excited about what they're talking about. But once you get past like the presentation part and get to the substance, man, he's all over the place. Like if you actually listen to what he's saying, you're just like, wait, what? What is he talking about? So real quick before we get into the discussion topics, I just wanted to get your impression of the initial TED Talk where he introduced this mystery box concept. Sean, what did you think of that TED Talk?
Well, I saw it. I mean, I was never a big fan of Lost. I never got into it. I do remember it being in close proximity to Star Trek 2009 and thinking about it, and then recently rewatching it to get here so I could get all the talking points. He's just wrong. I mean, and because the fact that if you think about it, the way he's presenting this, we've all been robbed. Think about Agatha Christie, Alfred Hitchcock, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. All of those stories would have been much better if none of the shit had been solved at the end. We got cheated. We've been robbed. Hey, redo those movies without telling us what happens.
Chris, what do you think about that?
Okay, so I have seen what's in the mystery box. People online have have said, oh yeah, I had one of these when I was a kid, and they've like revealed the contents of the box, and the contents of the box is garbage. Okay, it's crap.
So you're talking about the actual mystery box that J.J. Abrams bought when he was a kid.
So J.J. Abrams had he did the TED Talk, but he did a couple of interviews as well that I've seen where he talks about it, and he shows the box that he's got like in his office, and it's an actual box that he bought when he was a kid that's like at a magic store or something like that, or maybe he ordered it or something, and it had a bunch of magic stuff in it, and he was so excited about this mystery box that he never opened it because the anticipation was so great. He never wanted to be disappointed, I guess. So he never opened it. But what's in the box for real is a bunch of trash, crappy magic tricks that suck. And I feel like that's a perfect metaphor for J.J. Abrams' projects. It's you know what I mean? He doesn't want you to open the box because he doesn't want to see that what he has inside it is actually crap. So J.J. Abrams there's many directors like this. I've seen tons of projects like this. I remember noticing this distinctly with the film 8mm. Was it 8mm? Was that what it's called?
Yeah.
Super 8? Super 8?
No, there was 8mm was Nicolas Cage. Super 8 was the kids.
8mm was like a horror film, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think I saw that in theaters. I was in college or something. It was incredibly grotesque. I was like, why am I watching this?
Yeah, it was about
one of those things where you're like, why didn't I walk out of the theater? I paid my $10 or whatever. So the Super 8, I remember watching that, and it's basically like a Godzilla type movie. Except most of it is a kind of build up to finally see the monster, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's like E.T. meets Cloverfield.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And the ending of the film, I remember, was incredibly disappointing. Like, you guys even remember the ending of the movie?
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie was
Vaguely.
disappointing.
Yeah.
No, well, I don't remember it. And whenever I don't remember an ending, I'm like, okay, well, that movie wasn't very good. I don't even remember how it ended. That's one gauge I have. And, beyond that, I remember watching Lost. Some girl was watching Lost that I was dating. And I never watched any episodes of Lost until this girl was watching it. I watched 2 episodes. And in one episode, they set up all of these, story threads. And then in the next episode, they literally just dismissed the story threads that they had set up in the previous episode. And I remember thinking, why would they set these story threads up and just dismiss them? I mean, they would maybe they would tie them off in like a really unsatisfactory way. It was almost just like they were throwing shit at the wall, hoping that something stuck. And if it did, then they would go along with it. And if it didn't, they would just like, okay, forget about that bit. I remember watching this and thinking, why would you do that? And I was thinking, they have no idea what they're doing. So not that they have no idea what they're doing as writers generally, but like they were given this project, or they created this project with no concept of how it ends. Like they created this world where, in the circumstances that had to have some kind of conclusion, but they didn't think of the conclusion before they started the project. And I realized that, and I told the girl that, and she's like, no, these writers are really smart. Trust me, they know what they're talking about. And then, of course, the whole thing ended, and everybody was like, they had no idea where they were going with this. And I think they admitted as much in interviews afterwards and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I was one of the biggest defenders of the writers of Lost because I was like, oh, they definitely have a plan. They know what they're. No one would be this stupid to introduce all these intriguing mysteries and not have a solution in mind. And,
Yeah, that's the illusion that they
Yeah.
were creating.
and when the
they
final
did it very
season
well.
hit,
Yeah.
when the final season hit, I was just like, oh my god, they had no idea. No,
I was the only
knew
person
that-
that was impressed with the finale because I knew for all along that they didn't know what they were doing. So when the finale came along, I was like, not bad.
Lost was crushing. Literature Devil, what did you think of J.J. Abrams' TED Talk when you saw it?
Well, I mean, the thing is, there's some. Of course, his theory is just dumb. The way he does it, where it's integrated into like this integral part, like it's all about the mystery. But the phenomenon it's built on is actually a very powerful one. It's like kind of what builds up stories as a building block. It's just the mystery. We're interested. We are like this as people, as human beings. We are just wired to hunt down mysteries and feel excited about pursuing the answer to mysteries and questions that develop. I mean, you can have like a guy, like a nobody. There's nobody you ever heard of. Open up they set up shop in like a theater, like one of those big auditoriums, and then he can walk out, and he can say something like, "Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Let me tell you about the most embarrassing day of my life." And most people will probably be interested because they might not know this guy, but that's a question. It's a really intriguing question.
That's what they call a hook.
Yeah, a hook, a story hook. Oddly enough, you know what I mean? But it's with the J.J. Abrams, it's just the mystery. It's just exploiting that one need for us to explore something, without giving us the carrot. It's explore.
It's the ultimate clickbait.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I don't know, drinking. It's like kind of like beer's delicious, right? But drinking beer is kind of like empty calories. It's delicious, but you want to get that drunk feeling. It's like a mystery box. The way J.J. Abrams does it, it's kind of like drinking non-alcoholic beer. Like, oh yeah, delicious beer, but you don't really get the drunk part of it. Like, you don't really get the good part. Like, where is it?
I hate the taste of beer, so non-alcoholic beer would literally be the worst thing in the world.
Probably. I love the taste of beer, so for me.
We know how to
I
make
don't really
you
like
talk.
getting drunk either, though. So actually, the whole
But basically, it's just the phenomenon his mystery box is built on is sound. It's there. It's very useful. The mystery box itself is awful. It's just terrible.
Well, let's talk about our first discussion point tonight, which is what exactly is a mystery box. So basically, JJ uses a mystery box that he got from his grandfather as an example in his TED Talk. And Mr. Reagan kind of talked about that, where they bought like a $15 mystery box that supposedly had $50 worth of magic in it. And you open it up, you don't know what's inside, but it's a bunch of crappy magic tricks. And for JJ, he never opened it up because the idea of what could be inside there was always more interesting to him than what would actually be inside there. And so he uses this concept that mystery is more important than knowledge when it comes to storytelling. But then he goes off on these weird tangents about how like anything that is unknown is a mystery box. So if somebody did a special effect and you don't know how they achieved that in the movie, that's a mystery box. New types of technology is a mystery box. He used an example of watching a Steve Jobs Apple, what do you call those things, where he gets up and reveals all the new technology for the year.
TED Talk Apple Edition.
Yes.
Something like that. Apple does it every year, but he used an example of Steve Jobs doing a presentation and showing a clip from Lost, and JJ was like, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's a mystery box. And it's kind of like anything that the audience isn't aware of. So like he used an example of Mission Impossible 3, which he directed. And there's a scene in there where Tom Cruise uses his hand to stick a gun up his nose, but it looks like it's a different actor's hand. And if you didn't know that was Tom Cruise's hand, that was a mystery box. So like he uses all these very strange examples. For instance, he uses the idea that there's deeper themes in movies as an example of a mystery box. Like he was just all over the place. But for our purposes tonight, what we're going to be talking about is that the mystery box is a mystery or a question that's meant to intrigue an audience and hook them into your story. But according to J.J. Abrams, it's the intrigue of the mystery that audiences love, not the solution. So it's okay to actually never offer a solution to the mystery or answer the question. And so that's kind of the concept we're going to be specifically zeroing in on tonight to talk about. So what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think of this concept and why is it wrong? So Literature Devil, let's start with you.
I mean the J.J. Abrams version of it, where it's the one he had his TED talk, where he's just talking about, hey, I'm going to introduce a story hook with this nice, intriguing mystery, but we're never going to reveal the ending. That sort of thing. That scenario. Yeah, that's not how. That's dumb. I mean, it's not. There's obviously there's not. You don't have to answer every question all the time. But the thing is, what I've seen in terms of J.J. Abrams' use of it, it's like usually when he uses it, it's like really important to the plot when this kind of comes out. So, like, for example, when he had Rey, and like at first, the beginning of the movie, it didn't actually matter who her parents were. But then we see like she can just do force powers and stuff like that, and that which absolutely contradicts the lore of Star Wars. And considering this is what episode 7, and after 6 episodes, they have a well-established lore already. So you can't just make up new stuff. So there's already lore, and as an episode, a sequel in the series, you have to maintain very important lore elements there, and they just didn't. And with Rey, when she started learning these powers and just being awesome all over the place, people like logically, all the Star Wars fans logically said, "Well, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, even if her parents were like Darth Vader, because Luke didn't get all these amazing powers. He had to train for them, but." No. But the only thing that made sense in the scenario of Star Wars, after seeing Rey do all these amazing things without training, is she must be someone's kid. She must be someone special. That it's the only way out of this weird thing that they've made with Rey in that Star Wars movie. But so then it becomes a mystery box. Oh, we're intrigued now. We want to see who Rey's parents are. Never ever revealed. It's intriguing in the mystery. But we need to know, because that seems to be the only way they were going to answer that question, but there's no answer to the question. You have to set up, it's like watching a Sherlock Holmes story play out. And at the end, Sherlock Holmes is like, who cares? Who cares where the murderer was?
Yeah.
Well, we do eventually find out that she was like Palpatine's granddaughter. So we get some in 3 movies down the road, we get some clarification on that.
Which I always thought was creepy, because that means that Palpatine had sex.
Oh, yeah, totally. Chris, what do you think of this concept that it's okay to intrigue people with a mystery that you have no intention of ever revealing the solution to?
Yeah. Sorry, you're talking to me?
Yes.
My headphones started talking to me for some reason, and I lost you. Yeah, well, okay. To me, stories are kind of like stand-up comedy, right? Like a short story is basically like a good joke. You have your setup and you have your payoff. Very, very simple stories. Very simple stories are just like a setup and a payoff, and that's it. A great joke is the same way. Could you imagine somebody going up on stage and telling a series of jokes and just giving you the setup?
The setups.
That's a mystery box, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my TED Talk. Stories are all about learning lessons, talking about life, talking about, exploring philosophical ideas and this kind of thing. If you never pay off the stuff that you're setting up, then you leave the audience incredibly unsatisfied. Right. I spent a lot of my youth when I was learning to write, I was teaching myself to write, trying to figure out how to write great payoffs, great endings, great twist endings, great satisfying endings. Twilight Zone does this very well, right? I said Twilight Zone was my major influence. Twilight Zone was amazing. Oh, Henry is also an amazing at this. The author, if you ever get a chance to read O. Henry, it's like old stuff from like the 19th century, early 20th century. And it's really actually quite hard. It's really actually difficult to figure out how to end something in a way that really satisfies an audience. Now, there's a few ways to do it. The 2 primary ways that I do it is you do exactly what the audience wants you to do, but in a way they don't expect. And then they're surprised and they're thrilled, and oftentimes it's better than they even imagined. So that's a great way of doing it. Another way to do it is to create some kind of twist, something that happens that they don't expect, but it's actually maybe better than what they expected. That's another great way to do it. One way that you can do it, which I don't really like that much, is disappointing the audience. You can disappoint the audience. You could make, for instance, Luke Skywalker throw away his lightsaber and then vanish for some reason. You could do that, as in the Star Wars series. There's all kinds of horrible things that you can do with an ending that would be interesting, or a twist or something like that, but aren't good. And then there's other things that you can do that are what I call satisfying for the audience. And it's so difficult to do that I actually think that you need to practice this and you need to work on it for many, many years. The idea that you need to be good at setting up the mystery, I actually am going to break from what we're all saying here, break from the narrative that we're all creating here, and say, I actually think he's right, but it's really just half of the puzzle, right? If you're going to create a story, you need the setup and you need the payoff. And to be really, really good at crafting an amazing setup, that's great. That's a really important part of storytelling. But to completely ignore the payoff and say, okay, we're going to spend all this time on the setup and then the payoff is like whatever we just think up, on the fly. That will always leave the audience going home unsatisfied. And I think J.J. Abrams has a kind of bad reputation in Hollywood now because he is able to create, great cinematography. He works with great cinematographers, great special effects artists. He's worked with some great actors, and he's able to produce some fairly decent films. But I do think that the lack of decent endings is hurting him. And I think that his focus on this mystery box idea has trapped him into this world where, to some degree, because he did this TED Talk and because he is so known for the mystery box idea, I think to some degree he may be trying to prove that he's right. And so I don't think he's ever really going to evolve now. He's sort of trapped into this ridiculous mystery box philosophy, and we just got to move on to other directors because I think he's done.
I'll say this about J.J. Abrams. The more I look at the work that he's done, the more I realize that he actually doesn't have any original ideas. I can remember when I was first a fan of his, back when I was in film school, he was doing Alias and Felicity, and those shows were just like so different from anything else that was on TV at the time that he really kind of stood out as like on the cutting edge of the next generation of great storytellers. And now that he's gotten a few films under his belt, you come to realize that he's just kind of been stealing stuff from better artists and kind of putting his own spin on it and throwing some lens flares in there. And like his stuff is very derivative. It's very kind of copy paste. It's all based off of better stuff that he's just recycling and putting like a new layer of paint on. Sean, I wanted to ask you, what do you think of this concept that you can intrigue an audience by setting up a good mystery, but you never actually have to pay it off because it's the journey, not the destination, that's important?
Well, that's a good philosophical concept, but let's keep that in the classroom and the theater. We want to be entertained. I'll give you an example, and I was thinking about this while Chris was talking. Imagine Back to the Future, which is one of the best setup payoff movies in history. So we set up, we got the exposition around the dinner table. They set everything up and everything. Marty goes back to 1955, knocks on the door like this. We see Doc swing the door open like this. He's like, don't tell me who you are. Let me guess, right? And he's like, and then all of a sudden, you are selling encyclopedias, and he's doing all of this, and then credits. Imagine what would have happened if none of all this setup that Zemeckis had put up was ever paid off. Like, or maybe it just goes in a completely different direction, and suddenly he, starts running for office against Goldie Wilson. I mean, I think that actually the reality of, JJ is he realizes that he probably disappointed a lot of people with, Lost, because I think it ended about that time at about the same time.
Well,
as the TED
he
Talk.
actually didn't have anything to do with Lost past the premiere. He directed the pilot episode, and then his name was just on it, but he was off doing other stuff while Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cruise handled that show.
Okay, but you don't think he had any influence over it?
I mean, he might have given some ideas, but he wasn't involved in the day-to-day of that show.
What I understand is just his idea, right?
Yeah.
I think it was him and Damon Lindelof who pitched it to ABC.
But I mean, the thing is I think that now, and it may be true that he used it as an excuse to kind of cover up his screw-ups, his gaffes, because it really doesn't sound like a very plausible. But I mean, where would you come up with the idea that in telling a story that people are going to be more satisfied by asking the question of, well, what did I just sit here and watch 2 hours of, without ever getting paid off? And you guys remember the movie Waterworld?
Mhm.
Okay, now that movie lost a lot of money because of the overinflated budget, but overall it could have been an exciting story, but they left mystery boxes in there. We didn't know why there was an amphibious human. We didn't know why the ice caps melted. There was a lot of things at the end that were never resolved, and that was another audience disappointment for the movie. And it could have been a success had it, even though it lost money that only because of the budget. But really, there's a lot of questions in that movie that never get paid off, and it's not satisfying. As I said, can you imagine watching any of these classic movies? Jaws, right? Shark eats the girl. They go out and then they do a sidetrack to Tahiti or something and go drink Mai Tais and get drunk and they get Chief Brody screwed up and have him get a tattoo or something. I mean, this is, none of it gets paid off at the end. And that's not a good model. People want to be told a story, and it's the writer's job to tell a story. I mean, rather than the audience's job to interpret, where the story is supposed to go or how this all ended. And it only gets worse from 2009 with Star Trek, and then Star Wars, he ruined that. I mean,
well, it's funny that you should bring up Jaws, because in his TED talk, J.J. Abrams specifically talks about that, but he says that Jaws isn't a movie about a giant shark. It's a movie about a man facing a midlife crisis and, switching careers and stuff like that. And it's obvious that he's confusing theme and character development with the actual plot of a movie.
Well, Chief Brody was not unsure of himself, because he also mentioned in that he mentioned his masculinity.
Yeah.
It's like he was never insecure in that, or has his job as a police officer. He's a New York cop. He's new to the island. He's afraid of the water. But what he was he was the he was the advocate for the audience. Because imagine Jaws without Chief Brody. So you've got a scientific expert on sharks, and then you've got the old salty seaman on sharks. And they're both talking to each other. They know what they're talking about, but we, the audience, aren't familiar with this. So how do you do it? You take the protagonist and you put him in the situation where everything has to be explained to him. That is, and Winston Zeddemore in Ghostbusters, same character. Okay, we follow these scientists and we can kind of keep up with them a little bit, but when things really start getting hairy, they need somebody to explain it to, and Winston is our advocate.
That's one hell of a Twinkie.
That's a big Twinkie, right? And that's exactly the way it works. JJ doesn't know that because he's not a good storyteller. He's good at putting things together, like in terms of a crew and stuff like this, but he just throws random stuff out there.
He's really good at spectacle. Like he knows the big action set pieces that he needs to deliver, but he seems to be struggling with the idea of, what the audience actually wants from these movies. But just to play devil's advocate here, let's ask, is J.J. Abrams actually right? Yeah, let's play literature devil's advocate.
There you go.
So I've got a couple examples here that I want to throw to you guys, and just to see, is J.J. Abrams' concept right? So literature, let's take Pulp Fiction, for example. Now in Pulp Fiction, we have the briefcase with the golden light coming from it. We never find out what's in the briefcase, right? So you could conceivably argue that that's a mystery box, and that's a perfect example of what J.J. Abrams was talking about. But why do you think that isn't quite right?
Because in the terms of the Pulp Fiction suitcase, what's the contents of that is legitimately not important according to what the story is. Because the stories are going to go, they're there to take back the suitcase because I guess the guys kept it or stole it or whatever it is, and they're there to kill the guys and take the suitcase back. And then you have Vincent going in there and saying, "Yeah, we're pretty good, we got it." So he's just looking at it. We don't know what it is, but it's a MacGuffin. That's what it is. It's just a MacGuffin. We're there to. We just need to know the suitcase is important.
What is a MacGuffin?
It's if you have an object in a movie or story, and they're going to go after this object. The object is a MacGuffin, no matter what it is. Like if you go for after an orb or some magical crystal.
It's a Hitchcock concept
Sure.
that basically it's just something that's the catalyst for the story to come. It's ultimately not important. It's just important to get the plot moving.
There was this
Exactly.
penguin-like bird, and MacGyver had a child.
In the EFAB community, I guess
Stupid
you
joke.
would if you're in the EFAB community, I guess you would be looking at it. You recognize it as a McMuffin. So,
McMuffin.
so yeah. So what's in the box is it's fun to speculate. It's fun to come up with ideas. Is it money? Is it diamonds? Is it, my favorite theory is it's a diamonds from Reservoir Dogs. I like that theory. That's pretty cool. But ultimately, what's inside the box is not important in that certain case, because the idea is not surrounding what's inside of it. Like if it was like a bomb or something like that, and obviously that would change things. But it's the actual contents of the case is outside of what drives the plot or what's needed for the plot to exist and to progress. And so it becomes a fun thing to speculate about what's in there. But the only thing that's important is that we know as the audience that the suitcase is important. Everything else, that's it. There's no meaning in the contents that we know of, and so it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect the characters or the story or the plot or anything like that. So that's the only purpose the suitcase serves, is that we, the audience, know that's what the guys came to get, and it's important to Marcellus Wallace for some reason.
But Sean, according to J.J. Abrams, like a mystery box, you can have multiple mystery boxes, and they don't always have to be central to the plot. Would you still consider the briefcase in Pulp Fiction a mystery box?
No, the briefcase in Pulp Fiction is only important to the characters. It's not important to the audience, and that's the difference in a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is not important to the audience. It's only important to the characters. What's important to the audience is what the characters are doing and how they engage in the chase that is sparked by the MacGuffin. Hitchcock's definition of it, and I do this for my class. I impersonate Hitchcock while I explain it exactly as he did about the two gentlemen on the train, and one has a very large trunk he puts in the overhead. And one gentleman says to the other, he says, "What's that?" The other gentleman says, "It's an apparatus for detecting tigers on the Scottish countryside." He says, "There's no tigers on the Scottish countryside." "Oh, well then that's no MacGuffin." And what it means is basically it's not important what's in it. It's only important that it gets the ball rolling. And that's where it is. And like Literature Devil said, if it were about the briefcase, sure, we'd absolutely have to know what's in the briefcase. But it doesn't matter, because the briefcase is such a small little part of that film. And it's the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, we don't care about the Ark. It's not about that. It's about, the adventure and everything. So, no, he's absolutely wrong, because the briefcase in Pulp Fiction is only a catalyst. It's only important to the characters in the story, not important to us.
Chris, what do you think about this concept of, little side things being mystery boxes, like Marcellus Wallace's Band-Aid, the briefcase, all that stuff? These are all questions that Quentin Tarantino brings up but never actually addresses.
Well, if you want to identify these kinds of smaller story elements, especially when it's something like Chekhov's gun. You guys know the concept of Chekhov's gun, where there's an element within the story that it's sort of the opposite, actually. It's an element within the story that you don't think is in any way critical or important, and you've seen it, throughout the story. It's been there the whole time, and you realize it's actually critical to the story at the end, right? That's a kind of way of creating a satisfying twist that you didn't see coming. Like, it was there the whole time, we didn't even see it. Mind blowing. It's kind of the opposite, right? So, Abram's idea is you create a desire for the audience to know what something is, and then you never tell them. It's such a cruel, it's almost like he must be somewhat sadistic. Because that's like a sadistic. People want resolution. Throughout life, a lot of times in life we don't get resolution. We never resolve certain things. People sometimes until their parents die, have conflict with their parents. There's something that they don't know from their best friend that they never learn. There's all kinds of things in life we don't get resolution to. So what's often nice about a film or a story is that things that maybe in real life you wouldn't resolve, you do resolve in films, and in a really satisfying way. And it's a really satisfying feeling to people. And if you don't develop that ability to write satisfying resolutions, then you're missing a massive tool in your toolkit as a writer, I think. But with regard to Pulp Fiction, yeah, I think all those things work really well. It's fun sometimes to tease the audience with little things. I think that's fun, and especially with the briefcase. Man, that has had legs, right? I mean, that's a cultural phenomenon. People really want to know what's in that damn briefcase.
Yeah, people still theorize about it today.
They still theorize about it today. It's great. But when it comes to something like, I think Jaws is a perfect movie to talk about, because throughout most of that movie, because of the technical difficulties of the film, there was that sort of happy accident where they couldn't show the damn shark for most of the film, right? But the thing about that is the shark concept is essentially a perfect mystery box example, right? You don't see it. What does the shark look like? What does the shark look like? Everybody wants to know. Imagine going through that whole damn film and never seeing the damn shark. Oh my God, you'd want to kill Steven Spielberg. You'd be like, what does the shark look like? It'd drive you crazy. When you finally see that shark, you're like, holy shit! It's a fantastic moment. It's a fantastic moment. And similarly with the movie Halloween, I think the movie Halloween is like this. There are several films like this where there is a lot of monster movies are like this, where you don't see the boogeyman, you don't see the boogeyman. Finally, you see the boogeyman, and it's this, it's very, very difficult to create something as scary or as powerful or as beautiful or as amazing as we can imagine it in our heads. So if a filmmaker and a prop master and a whatever makeup artist or whoever it is that's creating the effects that we're about to see are able to create something that's even better than we imagined, that is a very, very powerful thing. But if you never show and you just always tell, which is literally the opposite of what filmmaking is supposed to be, then sure, it can work occasionally, especially with small things. It can work that the imagination is more powerful than anything you could possibly show on screen. That does work occasionally. But to use that as a rule, you're just going to perpetually make disappointing movies. And I think disappointing the audience is the single worst possible thing. I would consider that to be the cardinal sin of bad filmmaking, disappointing the audience.
All right, before we get to our next bit here, Backyard TARDIS sent us a super chat for $20. Thank you, Nick. In JJ's defense, I think if we never got the answer to his mystery boxes, we would be better off. If Lost was canceled before the ending, we would like it better. If we didn't know why Luke was on the island, we would be happier.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, kid. I actually, that may be true, but I don't really think so. I think people are mad at him mad at those who wrote that ending for ending it poorly. But I think that they would have been equally as angry if they hadn't ended it at all. And I think the only solution was really just to end it well. And the only way you can end something well is to have figured out what the ending is and write to it. It's very rare that you can just write, stream of consciousness, blah, 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 and then come up with an amazing ending. What you need to do is you need to figure out, okay, this is my character, this is my circumstance, this is my location, this is my villain, this is what's going on in this world. How does this resolve itself? Okay, let's write up to that point. But if you don't know the resolution ahead of time, I think it's very hard to write an ending that's truly satisfying to people. It can be done. You got to be pretty lucky, though.
Well, I also think to Nick's point that if Lost had gotten canceled, like let's say after season 3 or 4, whatever, people would have probably still thought the writers were geniuses, and they just never got a chance to actually answer the mystery.
If it had been canceled,
true.
But
now we have a second example of this, which is Game of Thrones, where the writers got to the end and gave you the ending that they wanted to give you, and revealed themselves to be complete hacks.
Right.
And I think that, Nick is right. The show and the audience might have been better off if it had gotten canceled before it got to that point.
Well, getting canceled is different than not ending something.
Yeah.
being
Right.
canceled, it sort of like puts the responsibility on NBC or whatever, whoever's producing.
But didn't Game of Thrones, the writers crossed the finish line before Jar Jar Martin?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that was the thing. It's like when you have a support structure there of material production that you can go by, that was the problem with Game of Thrones. Is like, well, he's not finishing this material, so we don't know where to go with it.
I have it on good authority that George R. R. Martin told them the ending he had planned, and they decided that they liked their ending better, and so they went in their own direction.
Ego. But
now,
see,
now,
if
I
he'd
never
have
read the
finished
books.
it,
Did he end it? Did he
No,
end up ending
no,
it?
he's still got
Yes,
two
he
more
still
books
has it,
planned.
right? Yeah,
he's still got, but if he'd have ended it, then the audience would have been just as angry had they not gone in the direction that he did. If you think about it, I mean, think about it. If they took their ending and put precedent over what George R. R. Martin came up with, then you still would have had an angry audience, and it's because
Well,
of
the thing
writers.
is if Martin had published his books, I guarantee you that what he came up with would have been a billion times better than what they did. And so they would have just followed that, because a lot of Benioff and Weiss's accolades come from the fact that they followed the books very faithfully up to a point.
Right.
And then once they start deviating from the books, that's when the show started getting really bad. So, that's what happens when you're stealing from a much more talented writer. So another thing I wanted to ask you guys about as a mystery box that could prove J.J. Abrams right is the ending to the movie Inception. And with that movie, like, it ends on the shot of a little top and it's kind of spinning, and that kind of gives you this idea is like, oh, is he still in the dream?
It's a cliffhanger.
It ends before like it answers that question, and so the audience is left to speculate: what was he still in the dream, or was he in reality? And so that could be considered a mystery box that is never resolved, and yet people seem to love that ending. So, Sean, what do you think of that as an example of J.J. Abrams' mystery box at
Well,
play?
again, it's not. The movie wasn't. The resolution didn't hinge on whether or not he was still in the dream. We got an adventure story that was told, and it progressed from one plot point to the next until the ending, but it really didn't make any difference whether or not it was a dream. So that's the difference. If the entire story hinges upon whether or not the top falls or the top keeps going, well then we might be a little bit disappointed. But it wasn't about that. It was I would rather use what was it, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rachel Ticotin at the end of Total Recall. Was he actually in a dream or a delusion? I mean, because I think it was a superior film. But it's not about that. Who cares? I don't really think that it matters. That's not a mystery box. That's the top, falling or keeping going is not a mystery box. That's just I'm not a huge fan of that film anyway, but I do know that it wasn't about that, and it didn't hinge on that. I mean, my problems with that film were not because of the fact that they ended it the way they did it. My problems with the film had other fundamental issues, but it was. I mean, I think it was a decent ending. It's fine. Leave it. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I don't think that's a mystery box.
Okay, Chris, do you think it was a mystery box ending?
It's a good question. I agree with Sean in that I don't know if it matters. But here's the thing: I don't like cliffhangers. Generally, I don't like cliffhangers. I think they're kind of a cop-out when it comes to writing. I think they can be used to very good effect. An ambiguous ending. Somebody had just posted a comment. They said ambiguous ending. That was the word that was in my mind too. The word ambiguous. If you end something ambiguously, that could be a very powerful thing to do, and it's sometimes a really good thing to do. But you have given the audience enough satisfaction, enough satisfactory elements that they feel like they have fulfilled some kind of a journey in watching your project. That can happen. I also did not like Inception. I feel like Inception is a special effects based film.
Yes.
The special effects were amazing. The story is okay. the concept was better than the actual story.
But it's better than the
execution
movie,
was
absolutely. Yeah.
better than the movie.
Yeah.
The concept was really good, but it wasn't. I mean, the cinematography is great. The special effects are great. The story. I mean, if he had given me that concept, I could have helped him with the story and made it a hell of a lot.
Yes,
That's what
I
I
agree.
feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that. But you know, I have a movie that I'm potentially going to work on at the end of the year or the end of maybe at the beginning of next year, depending. I mean, that's why I look healthier now, because I've been working out literally every day trying to get in shape for this flipping movie. But I don't know when we're going to shoot it or when we're going to shoot it. But that movie that I'm working on has an ambiguous ending. We actually intentionally give you an ambiguous ending. And the reason we give you an ambiguous ending is because the primary storyline is sufficiently concluded. Sufficiently concluded to satisfy the audience. And then we add in this other element that maybe you weren't expecting, an element maybe about the lives of the characters or the circumstances of the world or whatever it is that they're living in. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that the whole time I was watching the film. So then when you watch the film, if you watch the film a second time, it's literally a completely different film. You have a completely different sense of the film watching the second time because you know something you didn't know because there's this twist at the end, right? But it also ends ambiguously, so you don't know what happens in the future. And it's not set up for a sequel. That's not why I did it. I did it specifically so that the audience can think about the ramifications of this circumstance in a philosophical sense and just in a curious sense. Sometimes it's a fun game to play, to ask a question and let the audience think about it. But to me, the only reason that you would do that, and the only way that can be effective, is if it's done as an intentional choice, as opposed to being done because you couldn't think of a better ending.
Better ending, yeah.
If you can't think of something to, a way to satisfyingly conclude a film, then you shouldn't be working on that project. You should pick a different project, because the endings are so important to me. Now, when it comes to something like The Twilight Zone, right, which I'm coming back to The Twilight Zone, is my favorite thing. Some of those endings were really satisfying, and some of them were sort of like they just ended. And they didn't really have a satisfying ending at all. And people don't remember that about The Twilight Zone, but it's true. And the reason why some of the endings in the Twilight Zone episodes weren't particularly satisfying was because the concepts were so fantastic that if you were doing a show that's a half an hour long once a week, there were so many of these episodes that they would just pick great stories. It didn't matter if they necessarily had a good ending or not. Some of them were boring stories with a great ending. Some of them were phenomenal stories with no ending, really. And then, there was just a really interesting concept. Actually, who's the guy that wrote Blade Runner, the original short story?
Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick, right. If you actually read the short stories of Philip K. Dick, a lot of them aren't particularly great stories, but they're great concepts, right? Which is why they really take a lot of artistic liberty when they make the films, right? And they're very short. These stories are very short, a lot of them. So yeah, I mean, not all stories have to have fantastic endings. The mystery box concept can work occasionally, I think. This idea of let's just set up an interesting world, a phenomenal story, make people think, and then just, that's why people like Terrence Malick and shit like that. But if J.J. Abrams if he were right about this, then Terrence Malick would be the best filmmaker in the world. Like, he would have the biggest box office of anyone. But he's not. He's got a niche market. There's a bunch of artistic fucks that go watch him and go, "Oh, this is amazing." But beyond, yeah, exactly like Matt. But beyond the pretentious assholes, nobody likes Terrence Malick. Sorry, I am sorry. So J.J. Abrams and Matt Kadish and other pretentious assholes, they like him. And no, sorry, I'm intentionally being a dick. I love you, Matt.
No, it's true. I am a pretentious asshole.
I'm out of coffee. I'll be right back.
All right, that gives us time to talk to Literature Devil. So Literature Devil, we have mystery boxes as open endings. We have mystery boxes as MacGuffins. We have mystery boxes as side plots to a greater story. But let's talk about cases where the actual central story of a movie or TV show is in fact a mystery box. The best example is probably Lost. So the core theme or storyline throughout the TV series Lost is, what is the island? And that's the central mystery box. And they just pile mystery box on top of mystery box on top of mystery box on that show all of which has to do with what the fuck is the island. So what do you think about J.J. Abrams' concept? Because Lost was a successful show. Ultimately, it was disappointing, but it was successful. What do you think about the idea that a mystery box could be a central story thread in a tale?
I've unfortunately never seen Lost, actually, but I could see why it would be if it was run on mystery. Yeah, people would love that. I'm not surprised then that
Well,
it
let's talk
was
about
surprising.
Twin Peaks then. So Twin Peaks is a series that it's a mystery, and the central question is who killed Laura Palmer. Did you ever see Twin Peaks?
Unfortunately, I haven't seen that one either.
Oh my goodness, you're too busy reading books instead of watching
Yeah,
TV.
I
What's
read a
wrong
lot of
with
books instead. Unfortunately.
All right. Well, let's use Agatha Christie as an example.
Okay.
So basically, any mystery author, their central story is in fact a mystery box. The only difference is
They have an
that
ending.
yeah, good mystery writers have an interesting ending. When it comes to Lost and stuff like Twin Peaks, yes, they have an ending, but you could also argue that the ending wasn't very satisfying. So is it better to have like an unsatisfying ending or an ending that leaves it to the audience to try to figure out?
It really depends on, I guess, what the setup is. If it's like a murder mystery where you have to have an ending, it's better to have an ending, even if it's a little disappointing. But if it's, I don't know what the premise of Lost was, but when you have like a, say for example, you have like a Sherlock Holmes story, and it's all about following the clues. People really like following the mystery along with the detective, and the ending. A lot of the power from the ending is: did I get the same ending? Did we come to the right conclusions? Did I come to the right conclusions? Did I come along with the Sherlock Holmes? And are my skills measured up to him?
That's good. Yeah.
It's one of the fun things about reading a mystery novel. Now, what I also have heard is from people who write mysteries and things like that, is that they actually come up with the ending first, or one of the hints, piece of advice anyway. They come up with the ending first and then work backwards, so they can sprinkle the clues needed for you to logically come to that conclusion. And then then they they give you maybe a red herring or some different attention to something else, so that
That's how
you
you
can
have to write mysteries,
yeah
I think.
yeah, you write backwards. Now you get in trouble when you have here's the mystery first, and then you figure out the ending later. That's kind of where you get in trouble.
Yeah.
You can figure out the world and you can figure out the villain. I think those are two things you have to figure out before you start writing. At least that's how I've always done it. I don't know. Maybe Sean has a different idea.
Well, my idea on that, and I teach this to my students too. The biggest mistake I see amateur writers make, and even professionals especially, is they write the characters first, the protagonist. Protagonist comes first, and what the problem is that they tend to bend the world to the will of the protagonist. So you get characters that are invincible or they're perfect or whatever, and there's no rules to follow. You have to write the world first, establish the world, then you can establish the villain, because the villain also has to play by the rules of the world. And now you start working on your character, and that's because otherwise, and I also show that you also have to try to punch as many holes in your story as possible. If the story stays afloat after you've done everything you can to sink it, it's a strong story. But if you can toss a couple of pebbles at it and it sinks, well, what do you think the audience is going to do?
That is such a writing teacher thing to say, dude.
Poke holes in that story.
Yes, poke holes in it.
Cliche.
Yes.
It's a cliche teacher
It's
thing, but it's totally right.
Yeah,
totally
but they write the characters first, and then they bend the will of the world to the characters, and that's also part of why they don't have an ending until they get there. They don't have it worked out as to how the world works, so they do, and there you go.
You and I are so on the same page, and that's why I always try to get people to really think about their villain, or if there's a villain. If there's a villain, I mean,
what made Lex Luthor great in Superman the movie was not that he was the bad guy because the script says so. Look, I'm the bad guy. No, what made him great was he was charismatic, he was fun to watch, he stole every scene, and he was played by a brilliant actor. And everybody else in that film was brilliant too, but you had a really good villain. This is one of the problems that I had with Darth Vader as a villain in the first film. He wore the black hat. He was a cliched villain, and he was the villain because he wanted to take over the galaxy. You know, it's like that is dumb.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that one. Obviously, from watching regular movies, I have learned that a good villain has to have the word "damage" tattooed on his forehead, and he has to go off on emotional tantrums at the drop of a hat. So that's what I heard as a good villain. Okay,
I'll say this though, as someone who's written 2 mystery novels, it's hard for me to come up with an ending before I come up with the mystery. So like, I'm the type of person who I'll come up with a mystery idea. I'll be like, ooh, that's intriguing. Now what's the answer to that? And then I have to figure out a good answer and be like, is that answer worthy of the mystery that I just came up with? And so like, working backwards with a mystery isn't always the best idea. Sometimes it's better to get that hook first and be like, ooh, that's a really good hook. I want to know the answer to that. And then actually strive to figure out a good enough answer. But I'll also say, when it comes to like serial killer or murder mysteries or stuff like that, the minute that you reveal the killer, you kind of rob them of their power. You open that mystery box and they're not as scary or they're not as intriguing as they once were. I think the one one exception to that is Moriarty from the Sherlock Holmes books, where when Moriarty is introduced, he's such an awesome villain that like you're just intrigued by how awesome he is. But something like, I've been watching the show on Hulu called Only Murders in the Building. It's a fantastic show.
I've been meaning to watch that.
Steve Martin Short. Yeah,
it's wonderful. It's about these 2 guys and a
no spoilers. Let's use a different example.
Well, it's about two guys and a young woman who start a true crime podcast, and they're investigating this murder that happened in their Manhattan apartment building. And in episode 8 out of 10. They kind of reveal who the killer is. And at that point, I was like, it's a really cool reveal. But at the same time, I'm like, now like I'm kind of less interested in the show because the mystery has been solved. And there's still 2 more episodes to go. So you kind of have to make that balance of when the reveal happens. And then once the reveal happens, you have to make sure that there's enough still in your story to keep the audience intrigued.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that what you're saying is true about poorly written villains. If you have a poorly written villain, you and then you reveal him and he's a disappointment, he's poorly written. Moriarty is great because he's a fascinating. The first screenplay I ever wrote, the villain had this enormous story, right? Because I had to conceive of, why would somebody try to take over the world, right? That's a common trope in fiction. And I thought, I want to do that as a villain. And I thought, why would somebody do that? And I had the idea, what if a demon approached him when he was younger and said, we need somebody to take over the world, because all the souls you rule on Earth, there's this sort of rule that if you control souls on Earth, then when you die and go to hell, you control those same souls in hell. And we have this massive overpopulation in the world at the time.
Explains Biden.
And he says, if you control all the people in the world today, you'll actually have a bigger army than Satan does in hell, and you can take over hell. And so it's an attempted coup of hell, and that's the villain story. So
that kind of reminds me of George C. Scott in Firestarter.
I've never seen it.
That was a good. Oh, that was a good villain.
That's
and
cool.
you really liked him, but you knew he was the bad guy.
Yeah.
But Charlie didn't.
You want me to tell you the twist ending?
Okay.
Yeah, go.
The twist ending is that the demon that approaches him at the beginning, he's Satan, and he says, "There's no rule." He says, "You just sold your soul for nothing," and then he dies.
Because he's evil.
Because he's evil.
He's evil.
Right. So you have this epic story. You know, the first part's obviously the hero story, and you get to know the hero, and then you get to know the villain, and you're like, holy shit, his story's like dark, you know. And you get to know him, and you get to know his whole story, and then the two clash at the end. The villain dies, and as he's dying, the devil tells him, there was no coup. This was all just me fucking around.
Yeah.
And the guy dies, realizing he had wasted his whole life, and he's like, you know, in his 90s, an old man. And
you know, a great example of something like that is Kaiser Soze from
Yes,
Suspects.
Exactly right. But that's revealed at the very, very end. But nevertheless, you do get to learn his story throughout, even though you don't know exactly who he is. and it is a fascinating story. And the more I always found that the hero you can kind of make a little bit like one-dimensional, and the reason you can kind of do that is because one, audience identification. The more sort of universal you make him, the more people identify. But also, at least in my experience with regard to film and TV, actors put so much of their own charisma into a character that if you hire the right actor, if you hire a Harrison Ford, a one-dimensional character can be made really compelling. And so you just get a really compelling actor that everybody loves to play the main character. But the villain, to me, is far more important. The villain story
Absolutely.
really drives the action and makes the whole thing. So people, I think, just fail to think about that enough. I think right now, because of the intersectional feminism and stuff, they're going, okay, how do we create a black lesbian character who fights a cis white male? And
Trump supporter or whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
Trump supporter.
Yes.
Yeah, how do we make it? Yeah, so
Villains wear red hats now.
that's right. That's right. The villains
How do we
were-
have a story where the trans whatever fights my dad? How do we make that story?
Literature Devil, you and me need to write a story
Yes.
together. This is beautiful. We're going to make millions. No, but I think when you're focused so much on, pushing a political ideology or pushing certain kinds of characters, you're not focused on the right things. And also I don't know what you guys' politics are. You might disagree with me, but this is a video that I put out just recently, or I'm about to put out on my channel. Is if you're writing a character with a woke theme, right? Like I want to make a gay character, right? If you want to push that character in a positive way, it's very, very difficult to be honest about that character, right? To make an authentic character, right? So right now, a lot of these characters that are black, that come up from the hood, their struggle is often white racism against them, right? Now, I grew up in Oregon. I'm white. Everybody I knew was white, basically. It was like 96% white. I never met a single person who was racist against black people. And all the black people that I know that are really, really successful will cite being helped along the way by some white person. So if you were going to write an authentic story of a black person going from poverty to success, you'd write them with a white mentor or a white teacher that encouraged them or some white businessman that brought them up and took them under their wing. But if you did that it would undermine the narrative that they're trying to create. And so you have that with women, you have that with black people, you have that with the homosexuals, LGBT, any kind of, sexual orientation thing. And people really resonate with authentic storytelling and authentic characters. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're saying, okay, what really worked in the 80s was Luke Skywalker. That was a character that resonated with a lot of people. A lot of people loved it. So let's take every single thing that happened to Luke Skywalker and we'll give it to this character Rey, except she'll have no weaknesses and it'll resonate just the same way. No, it fucking won't. Because Rey, first of all, Rey is a girl. She's going to have different experiences than a dude. She's going to have different ambitions. She's going to have different loves, different hates, and she's going to have different weaknesses and different strengths. You cannot just rewrite male characters as female. You shouldn't just rewrite a white character as black. You shouldn't, you should just, if you're going to write, you've got to think about who that character is within the world that you've created or you're borrowing or whatever it is, and write for that character. Everything that's coming out today is so inauthentic. I don't even think people who are growing up now really know what good storytelling is. They're really, Hollywood's doing a huge disservice. Sorry for the rant. Somebody else talk.
No, it's true. It's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually want to get going on with our actual theme today, which is discussion point number 3. Why do mystery boxes need to be solved? So the concept of open loops tells us that nature abhors a vacuum and that audiences always want closure to questions asked to them by stories. And we as humans always seek to close open loops in narratives and in life. Just look at the true crime obsessed people where it's like you have these mysteries that actually occurred in life and people obsess over them for decades, sometimes hundreds of years when it comes to Jack the Ripper. So what case can you make as to why mystery boxes always need a satisfying conclusion offered to the audience? Sean, why don't we start with you?
Because I paid 12 bloody quid for this ticket and I want to be told a story.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really what's the point in being told a story if they're not going to resolve it? I mean, a mystery. See, and this is the thing. I tend to disagree with the entire concept of a mystery box as used in this particular case, because the mystery or the hook of a story is not some object that we can use. It can be a number of different things, but to quantify it, I think we're getting into our head about this box that Jar Jar Abrams has, in his closet somewhere. And it's like, no, you're trying to hook the audience because there's one fundamental question that you have to ask is like, why do I care about these people? And the reason why it has to be solved is because I invested my time. I've got better things to do than to sit there and watch you go off into your cinematic tangents from one plot point to the next, and then just leave me hanging at the end. It's coitus interruptus is what it is. It's
narrative blue balls.
Yes, blue balls, right?
Yeah, people like satisfying conclusions.
Yeah.
Happy endings. Yeah.
Yes. There you go. Happy ending.
Matthew,
Right yes.
keep it clean.
Yes. See what he did there? See what he did? Yeah.
Literature Devil. Literature Devil. Why do you think mystery boxes need to be solved from an audience's perspective?
Because I paid $12. The thing is, as a writer, we're not there. The argument would be right that mysteries happen in real life and aren't solved. Well, the thing is, it's not real life. This is a story, and stories need to have a point. Stories need to be saying something. A good story will say. Now, doesn't mean it has to be political. We gotta talk about social. No, talk about humanity. My favorite example is like Star Trek, Measure of a Man. It's not about right wing or left wing. It's not about social issues. It's about the question of what makes a person a person. What makes humanity humanity. And what makes a person more than the sum of their parts? For example, it's not political. But it is saying something. It's not about getting on your soapbox and preaching to everyone about the word of something or whatever. But a story should always be about something, whether it's about the importance of kindness, the importance of compassion, or the importance of hard work and discipline, or something like that. It always should be about something. And if you're going to set up a mystery box, it's essentially it's integral to the central heart of the story. What essentially you're doing is you're making the whole story about the conclusion. And if you kind of don't have a conclusion, then you're not really saying anything. It's like that's why I always like to say, I always like to describe stories as a conversation the author is having with the audience. It's that you're not dictating to them. You have to remember that they are part of the conversation too, and you have to cater to make sure they're interested still. And they should be allowed to think what they want. As Neil Gaiman kind of pointed out during one of his talks, is that I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's honesty in writing is important. And what that means is that I'm not going to tell you how sad the death of a unicorn was. I'm just going to write the unicorn dying. I'm going to allow you to feel how you want to feel about it. That's the kind of kindness and consideration you give someone that you're talking to, you're having a conversation with. They get to do something. And you tell them a story. They get to react to it. They get to find out take away from it, what they want to take away from it. Think about it, what they want to think about it. That's kind of one of the big problems now of stories, is that the creators creating these stories feel so superior and so smug compared to the audience below them. What they see the audience is below them, that they have forgotten about honesty. And it's like, here's my dictation to you. Here's my dictation. It's going to lecture to you. It's kind of, and then when you don't finish off a mystery box and you just kind of concentrate on the mystery, the theme, and everything. In my video, I kind of make it, compare it to, I'm going to promise you dinner, be here by 8 o'clock for dinner, and then and then you're at 8 o'clock. It's like, oh, dinner's not ready. Dinner's not ready. It's now 10 o'clock. And I'm saying, sorry, everybody, no dinner. I was just kidding. Well, wasn't it really cool what you thought the dinner was going to be? Was it really cool? Wasn't that awesome? Wasn't that fun?
Yeah. You had all the ingredients laid out before them. Like, guess what we're making tonight?
Yeah, guess what we're going to have tonight? Is it pizza? Is it chicken? Is it spaghetti? I don't know. We'll find out in a little bit. But wasn't that fun? Wasn't that cool?
If you brought them a bunch of Happy Meals with nothing in them, they would literally be mystery boxes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Here's a bunch of boxes. Now open it up, get your meal. Nothing's in there. Boom.
You know how you lay down
Sorry,
a meal with like the silver platter and like the covering?
Yes.
And you're just like, you're not allowed to lift up the covering. Isn't that a great meal?
They lift it up, it's nothing there. It's kind of like that one scene from Train Automobiles where he's like, Here's an idea. Have a
I
point.
I was just going to say the same thing. I was like, yeah, Steve Martin says, next time you're telling us one of these little anecdotes, because I was thinking exactly that when you were going off on that, I was like, this is planes, trains, and automobiles. Here's an idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, now you're making J.J. Abrams John Candy, and I feel sorry for him.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no. But imagine like working all day, working all month, and then at the end, there's no paycheck.
And you may or may not have a paycheck. It's under this glass.
Yes,
you're not allowed to look.
Yeah.
How much are you going to get paid this month? Let's find
Isn't it
out.
exciting to
it's
wonder?
Nothing. It wasn't exciting to wonder how much you're going to get paid. You're not going to get paid anything. It wasn't exciting.
Think of all the stuff you could buy with your paycheck.
Exactly.
And then like the Pulp Fiction analogy would be like, you don't know where your boss is getting this money from. You don't actually care, but you're getting paid, so that's fine. It doesn't matter where your boss is getting the money to pay you with. You don't actually care, but it's kind of fun to speculate. Is he a drug dealer? I don't know. Who cares? I'm getting paid. I'm walking off to
the
buy
Bernie Sanders philosophy of economics.
Exactly.
So, Chris, what do you think is the reason why mystery boxes need to be solved?
Well, I'll tell you what. We're like we've been talking about. Everybody wants to see patterns. Everybody wants to see conclusions to mysteries. I think that sometimes this concept of mystery box can easily be confused with the concept of a mystery, right? Just the concept of a mystery. A mystery is, by definition, something we don't know the answer to. That's sort of the definition of what a mystery is. We get all the puzzle pieces, but we don't have the conclusion. And that is very tantalizing. And so J.J. Abrams has done a really weird thing. I mean, there is a concept of the destination is not as satisfying as the journey. There is that idea. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes that's not true, right? The journey to Disneyland for kids is usually not as exciting as actually getting into Disneyland.
Are we there yet?
The walk to the ice cream shop can be very enjoyable, but once you get that fucking ice cream, you do not give a shit about that walk. No, look, the journey can be incredibly enjoyable. Sometimes it is better than the destination. If in a story your journey is better than the destination, you just haven't written a good enough destination. I feel like you need both of them to be excellent. And look, he's taking an aspect of filmmaking. He's doing this really weird thing where he's taking an aspect of storytelling, and he's saying this is the only part of storytelling I care about, and he's dismissing everything else. And it sounds very compelling because the thing that he's talking about is incredibly critical and possibly something that lots of people don't think enough about. But in being so extreme as to say never open the box, or what's in the box doesn't matter, it's just kind of a cop-out. And I think that every writer who has just worked their asses off for years and years and years to say, okay, I want to be able to write something that's got a very compelling ending. And by the way, what you said about writing a mystery, how you come up with the concept of mystery and then you got to come up with an ending and it's very difficult. I think that that's a perfectly fine way of writing, but just so long as you haven't written 99% of the story before you come up with the ending, right? If you're writing toward something you don't know what it is and then you come up with something, there's very little chance that what you've written really conforms to this perfect ending, right? I mean, you should put all the elements in place, but don't write, don't put all the work into writing the actual narrative and then realize, oh crap, I kind of painted myself into a corner here, right? You have all the elements, and then what I do anyway is that I have all these elements, like I have the world, I have the rules of the world, I have the villain, I have the villain story, then I write the hero, and I write what how he plays into everything, maybe his girlfriend or his parents or whatever it is. And then I'm like, how does this all conclude itself? And then once I come up with an ending, a lot of new story elements fill in the substance. Like there's a lot of stuff that suddenly appears that wasn't there before. And now I got to make sure I write all that in. And sometimes I forget a thing or two. But for the most part, it's informed a lot of times. What I'm writing is informed by the ending. And yeah, at the end of the day, I guess we're kind of boiling this down to this idea of a mystery box. Well, at least that's how I'm seeing it. A mystery box is the setup, and opening the mystery box is the conclusion. And if you don't care about the conclusion, you're just a kind of a hack writer. And so I think a lot of writers look at that and they go, "Good Lord, like, yeah, just be half of a good writer. That's perfectly fine. Everybody wants to read a story and then stop at the last chapter and stop reading."
Yeah, I mean, there are always those people who read the last page of the book before they start the book.
That's
And-
how compelling conclusions are. That's such a good point.
Yeah,
man.
and there's always a section of the audience who's like, I don't want to know the ending because what I can come up with in my head is so much more interesting to me. But that represents maybe like 1% of a regular audience. Everyone else wants to be told in a satisfying way what the conclusion of the story that they've invested themselves in ultimately is. And that's really why mystery boxes need to be solved, is because the audience needs that closure. And you can have the open endings like with Inception and Blade Runner and stuff like that, where there's a question that's still lingering out there that the audience can debate over and try to figure out on their own. But if the ultimate ending of the actual narrative that you just sat through watching or reading or what have you isn't satisfying, then people aren't going to want to think about your story anymore. They're going to be like, fuck that movie, and then like move on. So it's really important that you have a good solution to any mystery box that's introduced into the movie or story. Before we go on to our next topic, Nick, Backyard TARDIS, gave us a $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Lost is like the best foreplay of your life, and they say someone else's name right before the climax. It's very true.
Yeah. I had a thought too while I was watching the TED Talk, because he showed the scene from the pilot of Lost, which I haven't seen, but I noticed something. The first thing in my mind, and it's because JJ tends to spend an awful lot of time on the visuals, whether it makes any logical sense or not. So here's what I was focused on while all the carnage was going on around the plane crash. The engine was still running of the plane. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, how is the engine still running? And then I say the guy gets sucked up into the jet like this. I was like, oh, that's why. Okay. He said that, oh, well, if we had to do this live, then we would have killed a stuntman, but now we can do this. That's what he's focused on. What can we do visually that's interesting? Yeah. And who gives a shit if it makes any sense? Because it didn't make any sense. What it did was distract me, because I'm looking at the scenery and I'm thinking, this is out of place. This can't work. And there's a lot of fundamental reasons why it can't.
We are a little bit of a different audience, we have to admit. I mean, the truth is...
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, the truth is spectacle is very powerful. And so if you are focused on spectacle, you're going to get butts in the seats. You're going to get an audience. And he has been very successful at that, to his credit.
Exactly. And I can't argue that. But the problem is that the spectacle is king.
Yeah.
Visual effects are an aid to tell a story. They are not there to be in lieu of the story. You know what I mean?
Or somehow reduce the quality of the story.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of like a snack
focused on.
It's kind of like a snack food, but people are like, "Oh, this is delicious," but they won't be coming back for it. The people are still talking about Star Wars, the original trilogy, decades later.
Yeah.
If the visual effect is not carried by any kind of substance, it's nice. It's nice snack for the moment. But I'm not coming back just to watch that nice little visual again, over and over and over.
But that's what
decades
producers
later.
want. That's what the people who are bankrolling these films, they don't really care about whether it becomes a classic. They just care that they're getting their $600 million back or whatever.
Well,
the crazy
also visual effects, spectacle, anything visual, you only get to experience one time.
That's right.
And after that first experience, it becomes old hat. And, like on the Salty Nerd podcast, we watch a lot of older movies. Yeah. And when we watch these movies, we were like, oh, I remember when I first saw that, these visual effects were like cutting edge. They were awesome. Nowadays, it's like, ugh, yikes. So you have to keep in mind that spectacle is kind of something that has a shelf life to it.
Yeah.
So if you're relying on that to carry your story, it's not going to be very good. So like the one thing that never gets old is a good story. You can watch a good story a million times and never get tired of it. You can watch a movie with a bad story and great special effects one time and maybe enjoy it. But then every time after that, you're going to be like, oh, I'm bored. you know. So like it's really important to focus on the story first, and everything else kind of is reliant upon that. All right, so our fourth topic here is how to craft a satisfying solution to a mystery box. So one of JJ's arguments for the mystery box is that he believes audiences love the mystery more than the solution, and that any solution offered will ultimately be a disappointment to the audience. So how does a storyteller go about crafting
If you're a
satisfying?
writer.
Yeah. How does a storyteller go about crafting a satisfying solution to a mystery? Mr. Shitwriter, why don't we start with you?
This is sort of my area of expertise, so I want to hear from the other two first, actually. I'm curious.
Okay, Sean, let's start with you.
Okay, so how does a storyteller go about crafting a satisfying solution to a mystery?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the first thing, the question presumes that mystery is the entire crux of the story. So how would they? First of all, the ends have to be tied up. There has to be logical consistency, and a good example of this is The Sixth Sense. Everybody's seen it, right? Anybody not seen that? Okay,
That was well
right. Because
done.
I was going to leave if you know. No. The thing is that okay, at the end of The Sixth Sense, I was in the audience, and we were all doing the same thing at the reveal. Why didn't we see it? It was so obvious. That's a satisfying ending.
Yep.
Because the whole audience was thinking the same thing, and we're like, how did we miss it? We felt like morons. That's a satisfying ending. So what you have to do is you have to have logical consistency hidden in plain sight. It's like exposition being hidden at the dinner table in Back to the Future. Okay, you don't realize it's an exposition dump until you get there and you know things start paying off. At the end of any story, if you're going to end it with a satisfying conclusion, there has to be little breadcrumbs that you didn't realize were left there, that when it's revealed, suddenly it all makes sense now. I get it. That's if your story is a mystery. Now, whether your story is something else, there's other edit. But to satisfy an audience with a mystery, that's how you do it. It has to end well and makes logical consistency with the story.
All right, real quick before I throw this over to Literature Devil, we got two super chats I wanted to read. The first one is from Andre Anderson for $10. Thank you so much, sir. I'm about 10 minutes behind, but Game of Thrones showrunners are like Akiva Goldsman, good at adapting, I think is what he meant to say, but are really bad at writing their own stories.
I get adopting and adapting mixed up too.
Yeah.
I always have to think about it for a second.
I think it's always easier for bad writers to adapt better writers' stuff than it is to come up with their own stuff. Just look at Chris Terrio. You know, he won an Oscar for Argo, and yet he went and wrote Batman v Superman and Rise of Skywalker. You know, so like that's a perfect example of bad writer adapting something, winning an Oscar because he adapted a book, and then doing his own thing with two questionable directors.
Yeah,
it's
they're
easy
both
when you got a
different
roadmap.
skills.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have from 52 movies a year for $4.99. Thank you, sir. I binged Lost on Netflix. If I had to wait week to week, year to year, I would have been furious. Binging and not thinking is the only way to watch JJ material. You know, I was one of those who went week to week, year to year, and I was furious by the time
Matthew, I am so sorry, man.
I know. I was one of the faithful. I was one of the Damon Lindelof defenders, and boy, was I wrong. Oof, that was rough. Okay, so Literature Devil, how do we craft a satisfying solution to a mystery box?
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's this good storytelling. You have a mystery, you have a hook. You can have an intriguing hook. I mean, like this man was found drowned to death in a desert or something like that. Like, how'd that happen? You can ask yourself that as a writer, and it's like, well, how'd that happen? You don't even know yourself. It's kind of an intriguing thing because you're basically having contrast there. Contrast is really, really powerful thing to get people interested. It's kind of like I don't know what the example I like to use is having sad music play over a birthday party. Like, why is your sad music playing over a happy event? What's going to happen? So it kind of leads you in to some sort of implicit mystery and kind of waiting to see what happens or something like that. So you can have an interesting hook, but it doesn't matter what your hook is. It can be pretty mundane. It can have like this, Columbo style thing where it's just like a guy murders somebody else, man murders husband. Well, Or what? A man murdered husband. That wouldn't happen in Columbo back then. But like wife murders husband, husband murders wife. That sort of thing. It could be something like that. Just something like that. You can say the same with Agatha Christie. You can say something similar with Sherlock Holmes instead of sometimes he got kind of outrageous. But the thing is, you figure out what that is, and then you kind of figure out how who murdered him, your villain, your motivation, and then basically your mystery is discovering some other story, discovering some other what's going on around you. So it's like if you have a mystery of like who is that. Let's for example say what if they wrote Rey's parents really well. If it was written well and Rey's parents were like a big integral part of her, like, oh, she has these interesting talents because she was Palpatine's granddaughter. And they knew that from the beginning. They could have planted evidence in the first movie because they should have. If it was written well, they should have. And then like little nuggets of things there, little nuggets of information of what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there. And it kind of basically boils down to the kind of the Pixar formula. Like once upon a time, there was a girl who lived on the desert by herself. Every day she went on and collected junk to sell for food, and until one day BB-8 arrived.
Without being raised by parents, she spoke perfect English. It was an amazing fighter with bow staff.
She spoke perfect American English and British somehow. I don't know how.
Fucking eloquent.
Yeah, really good stuff. And then she was taught these things by a computer. It was really stupid, but like and then until one day she meets BB-8. And then this happens, and because of that happens, because of that happens, and all that stuff like that. So then, if you you need to have a mystery there, you're discovering the mystery. So the whole story is centering on the mystery of her parents, what they made pretty important in the first movie. Like, who are her parents? And she's waiting for her parents the whole time. Who are they? They're this important.
Yeah,
this important to her character. It's not like it's an off thing. Like, who are Luke's parents? We don't care. But they made like such a big deal about Rey's parents that it became something that we wanted to see kind of fulfilled. And so it'd be kind of interesting if they kind of left clues and stuff. That's why my solution was she's not waiting for her parents. She's waiting for her Jedi Masters to return. She left her abandoned on whatever that stupid planet, not Tatooine, and then Jakku, and then
I think that's the actual name of the planet. Is not Tatooine.
Not Tatooine.
Yeah, the other desert planet is what
the other
refer
desert
to it
planet.
colloquially.
It's full of desert planets in the galaxy. But she's waiting for her Jedi Master to return to explain why she has some familiarity with the Force and fighting skills and stuff. It'll solve a few problems there. And then she's waiting for who. And then we have to, of course, we still have to answer the mystery of who was her master. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, we have to. If you're going to have the mystery of Rey's parents, which was made very important in the first movie, there has to be clues, and they kind of give you a few clues, sort of, but they never kind of expand on them. Like you get like a helmet, like a pilot's helmet. But that which would suffice as a nice little beginner clue, but they never kind of expand on it, and they're just kind of wasted. They're never explored. So that we could have had like a nice pilot helmet. And it turned out that her dad was this awesome pilot in the Imperial fleet or something like that, and they're kind of hiding out from Leia, and they're running away from the rebellion force that destroyed the Death Star, and they had no choice but to abandon their daughter on Jakku, and now she's waiting for her parents to return, and she was that sort of thing. It could have been.
Call JJ tomorrow and have him hire you, literature devil.
Yeah.
I was like,
what the best mystery box in the world is? Literature devil's face.
Yes, that's the mystery box right there. Yeah.
I want to know so desperately what this man looks like.
Yeah.
He's too handsome.
Big mystery.
So,
Yes.
All right. So, Chris, how do you think you can create a satisfying solution to a mystery box?
I think these guys have made some incredible points. I would disagree with Sean a little bit about applying how to create a satisfying ending to a mystery by peppering the story with hints and stuff like that. I don't think that just applies to mystery. I think you can do that with just about every kind of genre.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What I meant was though we were focused on the solution to a mystery.
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily.
There was a kind of caveat at the end where you said, "I don't know if this applies to every genre."
Yeah.
And I would say that you may be cutting yourself a little short there.
Maybe,
I think that you have, really, I think that what you're talking about there really is applicable to every kind of story, and that's possibly the problem with a lot of writing, just historically, not even just today, but bad writing throughout the ages. Is like if you don't have a good concept of how to satisfyingly resolve this setup. Then you're not able to do that, right? Yeah. And that's true with a romantic comedy. Think about like it happened one night, or When Harry Met Sally, which is essentially the same film. I mean, come on, every romantic comedy in the '90s is just a ripoff of It Happened One Night.
It Happened One Night.
But
yeah.
but man, if you guys haven't seen It Happened One Night, which
Great
is
film. Great film.
precursor to really every romantic comedy ever.
Yeah.
Just an absolute gem of a film. Every puzzle piece comes together at the end. It's really a beautiful film.
It's Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert.
Yep. That's
together.
exactly
And,
right.
yeah, and it was, yes, very, very well done. Yes.
And I think it was his performance in that a film that inspired Bugs Bunny, curiously enough. Yeah, because he's eating the carrots. Yeah.
Oh, out in the field, waiting for waiting for a ride.
So, but I'll tell you, a great mystery box is from a mystery film, the film Seven.
Yeah.
What's
It's
in the
literally
box?
a mystery box.
Come on, what's in the box?
But even
Can
the
you
answer.
imagine they never showed us?
Exactly. No
They have an answer
spoilers.
in that
No
box.
spoilers. If you haven't seen Seven, I don't know if I'd watch it because it's a fucking
It's a
weird
great
movie.
movie.
It's one of
Great
those
movie.
'90s films that's just filled with like horrific gore. One of those. Tarantino's doing this thing where he's like putting blood all over the screen. Let's do that. But
Oh, no,
it is.
This was before Tarantino, wasn't it?
No, it was
Was it?
just it was.
I know it was David Fincher's big breakout movie.
Yeah, it was his big.
Yeah.
It was after
And-
Alien 3, and I think it was like sometime around the same time.
Tarantino was around before Tarantino though, because he was He was writing.
Yeah, he was
had,
writing.
Like, he had
So
a few-
Reservoir Dogs was like 92 or something like that, and then 7 was maybe 94, 95.
I don't
It
know.
was
I don't remember.
around there, but yeah, I want to say that David Fincher was kind of doing his own thing around that time, so it wasn't
maybe.
quite.
You may be right.
Tarantino.
Yeah. But it is a kind of a horrific film, and what is in
Yeah.
the box is horrifying. But the great thing is, what's in the box is supposed to be horrifying, and you fucking find out what it is.
But you
And if
find out what it is by not necessarily seeing it.
No, you don't have to see it.
You don't have to see it.
You don't have to see it.
You get it.
But it's a
here,
psychological.
yeah.
It's a psychological
They
thing.
communicate what it is.
Yes, they
Yeah, they
communicate what it is. It wasn't like Fincher just left it up to the imagination. We found out what was in the box,
But you
but
don't
he didn't
see
have to
it.
show it.
Yeah, you don't see it.
He didn't have to show it.
But that's
It's
just
brilliant.
that's just a way of doing it. You could have showed it, depending on the sensibility of the artist, the director. That probably would have been okay. This was more of an intellectual, more of a psychological movie. So not showing it was probably the right choice. I agree with you there. Peppering your film with hints as to the ending is really a phenomenal thing to do, because if somebody decided to watch a film twice, it's a very different experience if the film is peppered with hints, because then you're like, oh yeah, you know what? That makes total sense because and then you put the puzzle piece together. It's sort of like a game, and like I said, any kind of film benefits from. You know what it is? It's a respect. It's a respect for just the concept of crafting a beautiful conclusion. If you don't have any respect for the ending, and I think that lack of respect comes from the difficulty. It is really, really difficult to construct a truly satisfying ending. The ending of Return of the Jedi, which everybody knows this ending, so I don't think I'm spoiling it for anybody. Hopefully. If you haven't seen Return of the Jedi, mute the volume. But Darth Vader's redemption moment. Okay, this is a moment that everybody knows a redemption character. Redemption character is a character that has been either very weaselly or very evil or very weak throughout a film. And if toward the end of the film they decide, okay, I cannot live with myself if I allow this this situation to move forward. I have to change and I have to help out the hero. And maybe they shoot the other bad guy, or they somehow assist the heroes, or in the case of Darth Vader, you electrocute yourself by lifting up the Emperor and throwing him down a pit and killing him forever. And
Forever,
will never
gone.
come back.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's never coming back.
In that moment of sacrifice, right? He becomes the hero of all the films, essentially. One of the darkest villains in movie history. And by the way, to go off a little bit off topic, I learned something very important from Star Wars as a kid, which was if you want to make a villain super, super scary, first you establish a super, super scary villain, and then you have him kneel to the other villain and say, "What is thy bidding, my master?" And then you go, "Holy shit, that guy must be really powerful." You know?
kind of Wolf
So
effect,
that
where
was
they
a
had, like,
really that was a really good moment for me. But yeah, this idea of just the idea of knowing how the project is going to be resolved, just that alone, if you can just do that, that is such a powerful thing, because then everything else will lead up to it, and you can kind of figure out how to hide what's happening and to misdirect. Hitchcock had a great. There's this thing that he produced on editing, or he was in a documentary about, or something, and he said, Everybody hates cliches in films. Everybody complains about cliches. He's like, cliches are an amazing thing. You want cliches. Here's why you want cliches, because what you do is you do cliche resolution. You know, cliche setup, cliche resolution. Cliche. You do that like 3 times, and then you go cliche setup, new resolution that people have never seen before. And then people kind of get lulled into this sense of, okay, we're watching a movie, this is how movies go. And my favorite way to flip a cliche on its head, if you can find moments in which you can do this, which isn't always easy, is if you can find a cliche that's clearly a movie cliche that contradicts reality. And there's tons of these, right? So that in real life, like MacGyver used to do this thing where, I don't know if you guys watched MacGyver when you were kids, but
No, I watched it.
where he would like get into a fist fight and he'd punch a guy and he'd go, ah, he'd be like,
Right.
ah. And that was such a beautiful thing, because at the time, action films were, everybody was watching action films, Schwarzenegger, and he'd just go, bah, and it was like nothing. His hand was fine. But, MacGyver, and it's like, okay, that would happen in real life. So if you could find something that happens in real life that they never really do in movies because there's this cliche thing, then you can lull your audience into this sense of security. Like, I know what's going to happen. I know it's going, oh, shit, I wasn't expecting that. To me, those are kind of like really beautiful moments. And you can do that with an entire film. You can lead people down a primrose path and then give them something they don't expect, but it's better than maybe what they expected. And I said that at the beginning, but I'm going to repeat it because I do think that's the best way to really present something satisfying. Either what they expect in a different way or something they don't expect, but it's better than what they expect.
So I'll tell you guys how I would advise someone on how to craft a satisfying solution to a mystery box. And I've written 2 mysteries, and all the feedback I've gotten on them has been really good. People really like the endings. The first one is Sinful, The Devil's Breath, and the other one is Lawman, Rook and Berenger, Childhood's End. You can find them all on Amazon and Audible.
I can find them on my bookshelf.
Yes.
Yes.
I gave you some. The way I go about doing this is you come up with a really interesting mystery, all right? Just a question that needs an answer. And it could be something like a high-powered politician's wife is brutally murdered, okay? And then what you do is you come up with the most obvious solution to that mystery. So in this case, the high-powered politician's wife is murdered. It was the politician who murdered his wife. That's the most blatant, obvious solution. Now, most bad writers would stop there. They'd just be like, okay, that's the solution to the mystery, and that's not quite satisfying. So what you do is once you have the most blatant, obvious solution, you start looking at the elements to that solution, be like, okay, what can I change to make this something I haven't seen before? So instead of the high-powered politician being the guy who murdered his wife, what if it was his twin brother? Okay, so another bad example, but it's different than what the obvious solution is. Now, what if instead of a twin brother, it was a lookalike that politician hired to kill his wife? Well, what if instead of the lookalike killing his wife, the lookalike took the place of the politician, and the politician actually killed his wife? So like these are just like steps that you go where you're playing around with the most obvious solution until you figure out something that is unique and interesting and something that maybe you as the author weren't expecting, but you finally kind of narrowed in on it and been like, oh, this is new, this is interesting, this is different. I would be entertained if I were the audience and I found this solution to this mystery. And so you just keep iterating the most obvious solution until it gets to the point where it's not the most obvious solution and you're happy with it. And if you're happy with it, chances are the audience is going to be happy with it. So that's how I go about kind of doing that.
Is that subverting expectation?
Not quite.
In a
Not
good
quite.
way. I actually agree with you 100%. What I would add to because like I write kind of the same way, except I don't just do like 3 iterations. I do like 1,000 iterations in my head. Like, okay, what are the possible endings? That one, and then I kind of like work my magic to make that, to make it really impactful, right? It's like telling a good joke. A good joke isn't just the punchline; it's the setup to the punchline. That would be the sort of mystery box half of it, which I do think is valuable. Yeah, when you're doing that, because you're specifically talking about like a murder mystery, right? If you want to watch great murder mysteries, watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the TV show. Mm-hmm. There's also the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, which I don't think are as good, but they're still awesome. Alfred Hitchcock Presents half-an-hour episodes. I don't know where you can find. I think you can find some of them online. My favorite one is probably.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know what?
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
My favorite one is called Lamb to the Slaughter. Do you remember this one? This was written by Roald Dahl.
Is that the one where the woman killed him?
Wait. Okay, I'll spoil it. Let me spoil it. Basically, this woman. What happens? So you actually know what happens early on. I think you know, right? Don't you like watch the murder happen?
So real quick, is this the one where she cooks the murder weapon?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So basically, she kills her husband with a frozen leg of lamb.
Yeah.
She like clubs him over the head with it
because it's frozen solid, and it is like a solid enough to kill somebody.
It's like a baseball bat.
It's huge. Yeah. It's a club.
Yeah. So she hits him over the head, kills him. Yeah. And the police come to investigate, and she basically puts the murder weapon in the oven and cooks
in
the
front
leg
of them.
Lamb.
She's like, "Let me cook you guys dinner."
Yeah.
Yeah. She feeds them the murder weapon.
Yeah. And as they're eating, they're like, "I don't think we're ever gonna solve this." And he's like, "You know what? The clue's probably right in front of us." And he's like, literally eating it. It's fucking beautiful. Yeah. It's beautiful. And now the thing is, that's not really a mystery, even though it's a story about somebody being murdered. So it seems kind of murder mystery-ish, but she killed her husband. It's more of a suspense film because you're trying to figure out if the police are going to catch her, right? Yeah. And but when we're talking about a murder mystery. It's very difficult to write mysteries, murder mysteries specifically. And the reason is because you're usually dealing with a limited set of characters. And it's incredibly unsatisfying. Man, I'm going to produce a spoiler that's really bad, but it's about 100 years old, so fuck you guys. You have a limited set of characters, and you really have to make it one of those characters. If you're not making one of those characters, you're kind of cheating. Yeah. Right? If you make it a character that nobody's seen and he comes in at the last minute, it's kind of a cop-out.
It was groundskeeper Willie all along.
Yeah, a character that we barely saw. Yeah. I mean, there is that. So the concept of like a Kaiser Sose, which is kind of cheating a little bit, and I also feel, by the way, I also feel like Sixth Sense cheated a little bit because it was like all these ghosts were irrationally scary, and then at the very last minute of the movie they were just like, just kidding, we're really nice, and it was like, what the fuck, why were you mean? Anyway, this is kind of cheating also, but sometimes you could cheat and it works, it's effective. But if you have a murder mystery, to me the most satisfying way to write those is you do make it one of the characters. A Kaiser Sose kind of character is perfect because Kaiser Sose is essentially a human Chekhov's gun. It's a character who's there the whole time that nobody expects to be the murderer. It doesn't even cross your mind. It turns out he was the fucking bad guy the whole time. He's just such a good actor that he could trick everybody into thinking he's weak. I even created, in one of my stories, I kind of copied the Kaiser Sose character for a story. I just copied it. I was just like, it's such a good idea.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, the thing about like the Usual Suspects, though, it also has a deeper level because it's the unreliable narrator.
Well, that's where I was going next. But thank you for jumping on that, John. No. It's exactly right. It's exactly right. And that started with Agatha Christie. I don't know if you guys have read that book. Yeah. I don't remember what it was called, but Agatha Christie wrote this novel, and at the time this had never been done before, literally never been done in obviously they didn't have TV and movies, so it was just
literature,
and that was the only thing people knew. And people loved mysteries because they were like, oh, I could look at this character, this character, this character, this character, put all the clues together and figure out whether it's right. It's sort of like a puzzle game. It's like the video games of the day, right? Yes. Trying to solve a mystery novel. And you couldn't beat this game. And the reason you couldn't beat this game is because the murderer was the narrator writing the story. That was the end of this Agatha Christie novel. It was the most revolutionary thing that had ever been done with a mystery novel. Nobody expected it. People writing hate letters to Agatha Christie going, what? the actual fuck? This is bullshit. There's no way to solve this. You made it. The fucking author is the murderer. And people were pissed, but it was so brilliant. It was just her thinking about a different way of, and you have to do that as a mystery writer, as somebody who's writing. I've never written a murder mystery before, specifically for that reason, that you're in such a small box to play with, right? There's only so many things you can do. You really have, but to me, the trick is that you've got a certain number of characters, and that's it. And to me, it's difficult because, like I said, you can't. It's not a huge world. It's this world of this few characters, and it's best, I think, with a murder mystery to bring in a bunch of side characters, and you have to have a bunch of what do you call them, red herrings,
like Clue.
Like Clue.
All right, guys, just moving along a little bit before we get going. Gosso at Australian $15.99, which is like $1,000 US. I feel sometimes writers are too scared to finish a story. For example, The Sopranos ending. I think they knew that either way they did it, they would get hate. Well, I think that by the time The Sopranos ended, they were so far up their own asses that they could. They figured they could end it any way they wanted, and the audience would be cool.
They're like, we're going to make a prequel movie. Fuck this audience.
Yeah.
I mean, a while back, Chris called me a pretentious asshole. Was that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So the guy who did The Sopranos, David, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy behind The Sopranos, talk about a pretentious asshole like that. He's got that in spades. So I think like the idea was that they wanted the audience to know what it felt like to get murdered, which is being confused and frustrated, and then it goes to black, and that's what the audience felt. So it is what it is. All right, so getting to our last discussion topic for the night, outsmarting your audience. The concept behind mystery boxes is this notion that you try to outsmart your audience by never offering them an actual solution to the mystery. But in order to satisfy an audience, by nature, you must offer them a solution. So what I want to ask you guys is, how important is it to actually outsmart your audience, and is it okay to allow them to guess the solution to the mystery? And I will point this out before we get started on this, is that mystery boxes are the lazy writer's way of trying to outsmart your audience, because you don't have to.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You don't have to outsmart your audience if you use a mystery box that you never reveal the answer to. It's just that, I'm automatically smarter than you because there's no solution.
By
you
default,
can't outsmart me. Okay, but Literature Devil, how important is it to outsmart your audience, and is it ever okay to allow them to guess the solution?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's always okay. I mean, it's your job is not to. I don't think your job is to actually outsmart your audience. Your job is to craft a good story, and if you're doing crafting a good story, what you're doing with a mystery box, what you're doing in a mystery, is that you're laying down clues, you're writing stories, you're introducing characters, you're making you put ambiguity and mystery where you can. So it might be hard to guess the thing. It might be hard to guess the right answer. But if they do it, they do it. It's kind of how it's kind of the anticipation. Like, did I get it? Did I get it right? Am I right there with Sherlock Holmes? And if they can guess it, like, yes, I guessed it too. Fantastic. It's part of the fun. So part of the fun to me is allowing them to the ability and the capacity to guess the final mystery. So yeah, it's absolutely okay for them to guess it. It should be fine. I mean, that's part of the whole thing. If they know the ending, and they go back and reread it like a year later anyway, then there's some substance to it. Your craft is solid. If your craft is solid and your themes are there, you'll be fine. Like they'll find out the mystery. They go back and experience it again because it was so well done. It's just a good story. It doesn't matter if they know the answer to the mystery anymore. They want to experience a story again, and then it feels good again to have it all come to a conclusion and see things ending. Like I've seen Sherlock Holmes movies multiple times because I really like the story. Like I even like Robert Downey Jr. once. It's just fun. The characters
incorrect.
Yeah. Yes.
Everyone has like a weakness, like a weak point. I really like Sherlock Holmes. Like I really like.
I read all the books when I was like 13.
They're great. I really, really like Sherlock Holmes. So it's kind of an Achilles heel. I was anything with Sherlock Holmes on it, but I won't say that they're masterpieces.
The BBC show is really excellent.
For the most part, yeah. Until we meet Moriarty, and then oh my goodness, what happened to that guy? What did they do?
Yeah.
Because they massacred my boy. But it's like suddenly I'm yelling. That makes me scary. Or something like that. But overall, if you have good craft, if you know your craft, if you know your story craft, you put everything there that you need to put there. Have a little fun by putting some ambiguity there. Maybe there's a guy over here who might have done it because he meets some of the same criteria as the clues you're coming towards. But some, obviously some guy fits them way better. They can guess it. They might not. Not everyone's going to guess it. Some people don't even want to don't want to solve the mystery. Some people just want to go through the story and have the detective solve it for them. It all depends on who it is. It's, different things. But a good craft for a good mystery is you have your mystery, you have your hook, you have your answer, you have your villains, you have your character, and you have clues that logically, if put together, if you think about it for a little bit, will lead you to the answer. And the part of the fun is going along with detectives. So, and then figure out the answer and see if you got it. So yeah, it's absolutely okay to have the reader or the audience members conclude with the same conclusion as the detective. It's fine for them to guess the mystery. It's fun. The part of the fun is having that confirmation there, like, oh yes, I got it. But the craft should always come first. You shouldn't sacrifice craft just so you can have some weird, outlandish conclusion that no one would have guessed. It just gets kind of weird, and it just destroys everything you built. I've seen that happen before. Like people that said, "Oh, we guessed the answer. We guessed the answer." Oh, and then all the writers like, "Oh crap, they guessed the answer. We got to change it up." I think it happened in Marvel one time, or DC or something like that, where they kind of had a mystery villain built up, and then everyone kind of guessed who it was, and all the writers like, "Oh crap, they guessed it. They got to switch it to somebody else," and they switched it to some other character who was totally the guy, the mystery villain, and it turns out that it was the people got it because they spent the entirety of the story building up to this other guy, so it made absolutely no sense whatsoever when he went back to read the story again, and it turned out to be this other guy. It didn't make any sense. Just a lot. It doesn't matter if they guess the solution. Focus on good craft, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, Sean, I think that one of the biggest disservices that J.J. Abrams ever did to Hollywood was that his Bad Robot Company was kind of like the incubator of the next generation of screenwriters for Hollywood. Like he hired a bunch of young up and comers, and he basically would kind of mentor them and then push them out into their own studios and their own deals and stuff like that. And he was really the first one who was like, you got to outsmart the audience. And this led to the expectation subversions of people like Rian Johnson and David Benioff and D.B. Weiss and all these guys who basically were like, oh, we can't give the audience what they want. We have to outsmart them, and therefore, just like Literature Devil said, in outsmarting them, you basically build up in one direction, then all of a sudden, out of left field comes this other thing that kind of is the actual solution, and it's unsatisfying. So what do you think about outsmarting the audience? Is it a good idea to try to do it? How would you go about doing it? And is it ever okay to just let the audience have what they want?
Well, okay, so the concept of outsmarting your audience. What if you're a moron?
What
kind of audience do you have if you're a moron? When did it become? I mean, is JJ came up with this idea of that to outsmart your audience? I mean, that's what you do if you're a dick, not a filmmaker. I mean, and the other thing is that if your audience is smarter than you are, which we get the reaction from JJ, it's not important enough to outsmart the audience. I don't think that's important at all, because of the fact that you're trying to cater to their sense of wonder, and you're trying to ask them questions and see if they can follow it. I don't want a bunch of people that are just gonna, don't think, eat popcorn. I mean, that's not the kind of audience we want. We want a smart audience, because then it kind of uplifts everybody. It makes everybody think, and it makes your value as a filmmaker better. If your intention is to just go and outsmart the audience, well, first of all, you have to prove that you've actually outsmarted the audience. I think it's a cop-out. I think that the intention of outsmarting the audience by never revealing the secret, to me, it proves that you never had an idea to begin with. I think it's just an excuse for bad writing, for not having a resolution. And then it's like the kid that falls off his bike. I meant to do that, that type of a thing. It's so he's using this as an excuse. I wouldn't want an audience filled with people that couldn't keep up with the story I'm telling, because then what? Do I need to feel superior to my audience? I mean, I've got better things to do than to make myself feel smarter and more important than everybody else, even though I am.
I don't.
But right? But it's not important at all. I think it's stupid. It's pretentious, and it's insulting to the audience. And as I said, what if you're a moron, and the only audience that you get are stupider than you?
Well, the problem with morons is they don't know they're morons.
The Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Yeah.
I was wearing the juice. I was wearing the juice,
All right, Mr. Reagan, why don't you give us your thoughts on the importance of outsmarting an audience, subverting expectations, and is it ever okay to give the audience what they want?
I think it's critical to let some people in the audience figure out what's happening. And I'll explain that in a second. I think the idea of it's so easy to outsmart an audience, right? I mean, naturally, every writer should be able to outsmart their audience. Like, it's a sort of an infantile kind of way of writing because it's just a fundamental. Look, you know what's happening. It's your story, right? Outsmarting an audience is very easy. You just don't tell them what's happening. That's not. I mean, at the end of the day.
Well, there's a difference between confusing your audience, cheating your audience, and outsmarting your audience.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going, right? So, in political discourse, right, we used to have something called debate back when leftists used to want to actually converse with conservatives. Right. Now there's a kind of cancel culture where you're not even allowed to talk to each other because conservatives are toxic or whatever. But I've seen debates in which one side is very clearly trying to express a particular idea, and the other side is using big words, esoteric language, maybe even confusing or convoluted ideas or sentences. There's one guy, if you've ever seen him, his name is Michael Eric Dyson. He's a kind of black supremacist, race theory, race baiter guy, and he always uses big words, esoteric language, confusing, convoluted, sentence structure, ways of speaking, and he speaks really, really, really fast. And I've always found that people who don't want you to understand clearly what they're thinking aren't actually confident of their ideas. So there's two ways to win a debate, right? You can win a debate by clearly expressing the best ideas, and you can win a debate by making the audience think you're the smarter one. And if you make the audience think you're the smarter one, they want to be on your side because you're smarter, right? And that's it's sort of like a way to cheat, right? A way to cheat. It's like, oh, I'm so smart. And I feel like Terrence Malick is this kind of filmmaker, where he's like, oh, let's make all these weird, funny, interesting, mesmerizing images but a story that doesn't quite make sense, and then people just think I'm like a fucking genius. It's like, no, you're just a weirdo. It's like look, the best stories are clearly told and well crafted. You can use tricks to make people think a story's good. Ways of outsmarting the audience or whatever. But I don't think these films are ever going to be classics. You can have a film in which no one can guess what's happening. I mean, it's very easy. Like I said, it's very easy to make a film in which nobody really can guess the ending because you just don't tell them what the ending is, right? You just mislead them. And it just isn't a good film, right? I mean, that doesn't make a good film just because the audience can't tell what the ending is. You have other films that are considered like great classics of cinema, right? Like I said, like any romantic comedy, basically. When Harry Met Sally, any of these kind of films. Everybody knows what the fucking ending is. Everybody knows that the couple's going to get together at the end. Everybody knows he's going to run after her and stop her from getting married to the guy that she doesn't really love or whatever it is. Everybody knows that's how it's going to end. But you love it if it's done well. If the writing is done in a way that creates this emotion in the audience or makes the audience feel satisfied with the ending. It doesn't matter if every fucking person in that theater knows how it's going to end. So letting some of the audience members know. And so here's the main point I want to make about letting the audience know. If some members of the audience get what your ending is, that's just a good indication of what you wrote making sense. right? I mean, yeah, maybe you weren't covert enough, or if everybody's getting it, it's supposed to be hidden. Yeah, maybe you weren't covert enough about hiding what the ending was going to be or something like that. That's a possibility. But for the most part, there's a certain number of endings that make sense, and then there's endings that really don't make any sense at all, right? And to just what's Yu-Yo writing? What was that?
Yu says a space whale falls on Luke Skywalker. Wow, I did not see that coming. Expectations subverted.
Well, Yu-Yo's hit the nail on the head. Exactly. Yes. It's sort of the same thing as like outsmarting the audience by just not telling them what the hell's going on or confusing them. The same principle applies to subverting expectations. Subverting expectations is an incredibly powerful thing to do if the expectations that you subvert are subverted in a way that makes sense.
Or enhances the story.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it enhances the story. Thank you, Literature Devil. Exactly. If you can enhance the story, you can enhance the experience of the people watching by subverting the expectation, then by all means do so. But if you're just going to disappoint the audience or upset them, or what you're going to do is convoluted or doesn't make any sense, stop, rethink what you're doing, maybe make something that's a little bit more simple, maybe doesn't subvert expectations but still satisfying or interesting, and put that in. I mean, there's fundamentals of story writing that really shouldn't be subverted unless you can do it really, really well. And in those moments should be very powerful because most of the movie doesn't subvert expectation. Most of the movie conforms to expectation, and then occasionally you put something in that's like, oh wow, that's really powerful, that's really cool.
Well, I'll tell you guys. Yeah, I'll tell you guys this. There's this concept in Hollywood that you can't allow the audience to guess your ending or guess your plot twist or what have you. But there is a certain segment of an audience who gets satisfied with the knowledge that they predicted what was going to happen. That's fun for them. And when they see that they were right, they're validated because they're like, the writers and I are on the same level. And then the other people who didn't see it coming are surprised. Yeah. This idea that you have to basically make the entire audience not see what's coming, like Arya Stark killing the Night King instead of Jon Snow, like that's the type of thing where it's just like, no, that's not what anyone wanted, but they did it because everyone expected Jon Snow to kill the Night King. And so like they were trying to give us a twist or subvert our expectations or outsmart the audience. Keep in mind that like you shouldn't be adversarial with your audience. You should try to be smarter than they are, but if you're not, don't try to force it, allow it to happen, because an audience can get just as much enjoyment of guessing correctly what you've got planned as to those who are surprised by it. So
every time I write a script, I think exactly what you're saying. Exactly. I think, look, most people are never going to guess what I'm writing here, but some people will. And that's a good thing for precisely the reason that you said. And I always think of this. Every time I finish a script, I think exactly what you just said. And I'm very happy with that outcome. I think that's the right outcome to have.
That's why I describe storytelling as a conversation and not a hostile exchange of insults to your audience.
Yeah, exactly. You should befriend an audience because
it's a game you're playing with.
It's what you're making. They're why you're doing what you're doing.
Or hashtag in this together.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
In this together. All right, guys. So we've been going on for about 2 hours now. I think it's about time we wrap it up. Mr. Reagan, coming at us from beautiful crime-riddled Los Angeles with all of the cop cars and ambulances going on outside. Where can they find out more about you, and what do you have to offer our wonderful audience out there?
Yeah, I mean, I mainly do politics, and I criticize, what's going on in Washington, D.C. On my channel called Mr. Reagan. That's my YouTube channel, but I've started a new channel called Mr. Pagan, which is exactly the opposite. So on Mr. Pagan, I take the opposite approach. I make the counterpoints as a leftist, as an extreme radical leftist, and I do it with this voice here, and I wear these glasses here so that you can see that I'm a very different person. Obviously,
where's your blue hair with the top knot and beard?
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm not theatrical enough to go through all that effort. But yeah, I put on a funny voice and I wear these glasses and I make points like, for instance, the point that Joe Biden meant to leave all of those military weapons in Afghanistan because, if the Taliban gets everything they want, they'll be spoiled and maybe they'll all become trans and then they'll marry American men and then we will control the Taliban because Sharia law says that these trans women have to obey their husbands. So that was Joe Biden's plan all along.
Brilliant.
So he's a genius. Joe Biden is. You guys don't realize
that's
it.
Spectre level of evil genius plottery.
He
right
really
there.
is. He's a
Yes.
fucking genius, and nobody respects him, and it's sad. So, anyway, that's my Mr. Pagan. So, subscribe to my Mr. Pagan channel. I post 1 or 2 funny videos a month, and subscribe to my Mr. Reagan channel, and I'm constantly producing criticism of politics. If you don't like me, that's fine. You can leave nasty comments or turn me off.
Yeah, Chris's channels are a lot of fun. He really does great videos. Mr. Apple Critic, Sean, the film professor, why don't you tell people where they can find out more about you, as long as they leave you alone?
Oh, I mean, I teach at the College of Southern Nevada and on the North Las Vegas campus. So there, I do everything I can to help my students succeed. I don't try to prove how smart I am by pointing out, but yeah, I'm really, it's fun doing this, particular type of thing, because it is kind of motivating me to launch my channel. I do have, if you go to the Crabapple Critic on YouTube, there is a channel with a single video, which is my stinger intro that I have. That's the only thing that I've put up. Everything on my other channels from YouTube I've taken down because I disagree with YouTube's censorship policies and stuff like that. So that's why there's really none of my content up there anymore. It's been almost 2 years since I took everything down. But yeah, I'm just me, and I try to help productions as best I can.
And Sean is very off the grid, and another person who's so off the grid we don't even know his face is Literature Devil. So, Literature Devil, why don't you tell us about your YouTube channel, where we can find out and support your comic book and any other projects you're working on?
Oh yeah, I have a YouTube channel called Literature Devil, where I go into the philosophy and the craft, the story mechanics of stories, and look into characters that could have been better, like Superman or Ray. I actually did a whole video on Superman and if he's still relevant today.
Great
And one
video.
of the videos is appreciate it. And I also did one on Mystery Box. I just recently came out with one about comics versus manga, woke comics versus manga, specifically woke because you can have good American comics. You used to have good American comics, but the woke philosophy really damages the craft. So I go into that, and that's kind of what I do. Just go over these videos and the philosophy, breaking down, using some evidence to go into these ideas and things. I also have a stream every morning. I call it World Morning Nonsense. We just have fun, talk about story, talk about stuff that's going on in the world, all kinds of things. And then also I have a comic book, Dr. Alpha Miracle Child. I've been working on it for about 2 years now, and it's still available on Indiegogo for now. I'm hoping to get it done, ready for ship by the end of October. I'm hoping. The main story is done, side story is done, all the side story stuff is done, extra stuff is done. I'm just waiting on 2 more pages. And then it has to go to this very kind person who said that he could put together the print files for me. And then, of course, you go to print, and then I have them, and then they'll go off to the wonderful, wonderful backers. But it's not yet done. It should be close to being done by now. It's close to we're wrapping things up, kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but still available for now on Indiegogo. If you want to check it out, Dr. Alpha Miracle Child. It is the main story is 112 pages. The first side story, Lady Midnight side story, 10 pages. The Dr. Alpha New Kid side story, another 8 pages. So it's going to be a pretty hefty book.
Well,
Awesome.
you know what they say. It's about girth, not length. So,
Exactly.
guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. And just real quick to all you out there still in the chat, what I wanted to announce is that so today was a very mystery-specific type thing where we kind of narrowed in on mysteries. Next week's Bad Writing, I have not 1, but 2 former homicide detectives who are also well-versed in screenwriting and novel writing who are going to be guests. One of them is Derek Pacifico. He was a former Los Angeles Sheriff's County police detective, and he got into consulting on lots of movies and TV shows, and he even gave seminars about how to write believable crime scene and police and stuff like that to screenwriters in Hollywood. That's how I met him. And now he teaches, I think, crime writing at a college somewhere down south. And he's going to be on the show to kind of give his perspective on how to write mysteries and crime novels and police officers. And then we've got another gentleman named Tom Keller, who's a Las Vegas local. He was a former homicide police detective here in the Las Vegas metropolitan area. He was a private investigator, and he's a fantasy fiction writer and a good friend of mine. And he's agreed to come on along with Derek. And we're going to have another special guest who is yet to be announced. But all next week, we're going to be talking about crime writing from an actual perspective of actual former homicide detectives. So it's going to be a really interesting show. And before we get out of here, I just want to thank everyone who showed up for the chat. All you guys who gave us those super chats, we really appreciate it. All the money that we make off the YouTube channel goes back into the podcast. What we're doing, our big goal right now is to save up enough money to get an actual studio space next year so we can have like an actual professional production coming at you, a little clubhouse where we can all go and kind of like do live streaming and do podcasting and all that fun stuff. So any support you guys throw our way, we really appreciate it. But if you want extra content, extra shows every week, behind the scenes bloopers, outtakes, funny things, like we just released our dad joke challenge video to our patrons early today. It's been getting a lot of good feedback. It's very funny. It's basically where Vader and Alex sit face to face and read each other dad jokes and try not to laugh. It's hilarious. Just go to saltynerdclub.com, sign up for the members area. You get tons and tons of free content. I shouldn't say free. You get tons and tons of content over there being a member. So if you like the stuff that we put out on our YouTube channel for the general populace, you get it in spades over there. And we also do patron-only live streams and Q&A and stuff like that. So anything that you guys throw our way, we really appreciate, but we are also putting it towards making better and more content for you. So thank you guys so much. Remember, every Thursday is Bad Writing Day. Same bat time, same bat channel, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Every Thursday, we're going to be tackling tons of different interesting topics and subjects with tons of interesting guests. I want to thank my esteemed panel for today as well. You guys were awesome. I always learn so much listening to my panelists and having a good discussion. So everyone, thank you so much. And as always, stay salty, my friends. I'll catch you later.